Happy Friday to everybody. Okay, so we are going to talk about ancestor worship, and I'm going to give you my new understandings about why that happens and why our ancestors used to worship their ancestors. Why is ancestor worship so important? And I'm going to be sharing with you, along with that, my understanding of Hamingja spirits. What is a Hamingja spirit? So I'm also, I'm not just going to be pulling information out of the history books. Okay, there's plenty of people out there. If you want to Google ancestor worship, or if you want to Google Hamingja spirit, plenty of information out there with people guessing at what they think history says. This is what it was. I'm going to be sharing with you my personal experience and my personal understanding, because really, look, when it comes to spirituality, if you can't practically experience it in your life, who cares? Who cares? I get people who comment on my videos, and they'll ask questions like, can you please provide proof? To whatever it was I was talking about, or whatever my opinion, or whatever I'm teaching. And my response to that is I'll write back and I'll say, well, what is proof to you? And more often than not, they don't respond, maybe because they don't have an answer, or because they know that I'm not, I'm going to perhaps really take them to task over their lack of thought about it. But what a lot of people want when they say, can you give me proof, is they want me to quote from some book. The older the book, the more proof it is. So, and my response is almost always, why do you care what somebody else wrote? Just because it is the Bible, or the Bhagavad Gita, or who cares what? The Anunnaki mythology. Who cares what it was? Some human being wrote it down. And now, because it's been written down, you take it as proof. Let me give you an example of how this is happening now in modern times, and I'll get back to the subject. But, I got to share with you guys where I'm at. So there's this new conspiracy. Well, it's new to me. Apparently, it's not new, but you know how I feel about conspiracy theories. There's this new conspiracy out there called the Q Anonymous, or something like that. And it's just crazy, the beliefs that these people run around with. I won't get into it because I don't want to turn this into a political debate, but the same thing could be true, with anybody. When anybody starts spouting this and that, and this is the truth and whatever, and if you question it, they'll say, do your research, which means watch the videos that I watch. They're not really saying do research. They're saying watch the videos that I watch. And, if there's enough videos, or if there's enough people saying it, or if there's enough stuff written down about it, then that becomes proof. 10,000 people say this, and only 1,000 people say this. Well, the 10,000 people must be right. There's your proof. So that's not what I'm doing here today. I am sharing with you personal experience. Personal experience is the main thing that fuels my belief, because again, when it comes to spirituality, we are either talking about a science, or we are talking about fantasy. I have nothing against fantasy. As you know, I use it in my work a lot. And I have nothing against people creating fantasies and creating fantasy stories. I like to watch sci-fi as much as anybody. But when it comes to true spirituality, I am a scientist, which means I want to see how it works. How is it practically applied? So when it comes to the understanding of ancestor worship, I'm going to be giving you a personal experience that I just had. having to do with ancestor worship, which I think really showed me not only how important it is to understand what true ancestor worship is, what the point of worshiping the ancestors is, and more importantly, it will tell you how important it is for you to live your life here. And what you do here in this life that you have right now is the most important thing that you can do for the people that are coming behind you. So I'm going to be talking about that. So let me get the book material out of the way, in case you're not familiar with that. Ancestor worship is something that we still do today. You may not realize that you do it. Every time that you celebrate Christmas, and I personally love the Christmas rituals, even though I myself am not a Christian, and that's because 90% of the Christmas rituals have nothing to do with the biblical story of Jesus. Nothing. They all come from our ancestral worship of the changing of the seasons, of moving into the new year. One of the most beautiful traditions that we have in Christmas is we hang stockings over the fireplace. And even to this day, we have a mantelpiece over the fireplace. And over that fireplace, we will put pictures of our deceased relatives, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, whoever it was that's died. That's where we put their picture. We put it over the fireplace. Why do you think we do that? Well, one of the old names for the fireplace, and I'll write this down here, is Ingle Nook. Okay? Ingle Nook comes from two words. It comes from the word ing and the word nook. So ing, as you know, is a rune. And don't let me forget to talk about the runes here. I have a set of rune cards that I'm going to recommend to you from one of a fellow Thunder Wizard. I'm trying to make sure that we see it. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. The Ing rune. The Ing rune in Proto-Germanic meant God of the home fire, or the god of the sacrificial fire. There are two words in the English language for fire. We only use one of them now. And this represents the fact that we have walked away from the ancient ancestral worship of the sacred fire. And that is, there was always a word for the physical fire, which is fire. You know it in, I don't know if it's Greek or Latin, as, the pyre, the funeral pyre. Same words, the funeral fire. Pyre is an older pronunciation of the word for the actual fire. Then there was fire that was associated with the internal sacred sacrifice, where the priests or the shamans would sacrifice an offering onto the sacred fire, and the smoke from that sacrifice would rise to the heavens all the way up to the gods. And a sacrifice is an exchange of energy. So we have to understand that, if we're talking about a sacrifice, now, right down the street, 3 blocks, I can walk out of my house and I can be in a huge building that has nothing but food in it. And in there is whole giant sections of frozen meats of all kinds. And for a few bucks, you can grab a big chunk of chicken or a big chunk of beef or bacon or whatever the heck it is you want, and go back home and stick it in your freezer or your refrigerator and eat it at your leisure. And for just a few bucks. But for our ancestors, let's just take bacon, for example. In order to make bacon, you had to first hunt a pig down, or take a pig that you had, if you had a pig, and that pig would have been worth, I don't even know how much, $10,000. I don't know, a lot of money in comparison to today. If you were to take that pig and if you wanted to turn that into bacon, which they probably called salted pork, then you would have to do exactly that. You'd have to gut the pig and clean it and get the meat off of it, cut it into strips, and then you'd have to salt it, maybe smoke it, because then you wouldn't have to, then you could keep it for a long time. Sort of like pig jerky. And that was a long process, and it took a lot of time and effort, and it was really valuable. If you were going to sacrifice an entire animal, that could have been thousands of dollars worth of value to you. And so we did that because we understood that in order to get anything out of life, whether it's a personal relationship, whether it's a spiritual connection, whether it's an intention, there has to be an exchange of energy. Which is why any light workers out there, I don't care what you do for your spiritual service, whether you're a healer or whether you're a priest or whether you're a counselor, even if you're, quote, just spiritual, you have to charge money. The word fee, F-E-E, comes from the Old English word fehu, which is similar to the Sanskrit word pashu, which all means cow. So whenever you pay a fee, you are paying a cow. That meant in times past, we know from the Roman historians that the ancient Germanic tribal people did not use money. When Rome was conquering the world and they discovered these primitive Northern Europeans, these barbarians running around in skins and riding bareback on horses and all that kind of stuff, sound familiar? They didn't pay with money. If you wanted somebody to build a house for you, you gave them a cow. You gave them a fee. You gave them a fehu. So you need to charge a fehu, a fee, whenever you do anything for anybody. That's because it's a spiritual principle that there must be an exchange of energy. And this is why our ancestors would sacrifice to the gods. They would sacrifice the most valuable thing that they had, which would have been a cow or a goat or a pig, because that was huge money right there. There's a house right there. That cow walking around in your little pen back there, you could say, do I want to eat it or do I want to build a house with it? Because you could tell the builder, hey, I'll give you that cow if you build me a house. Okay? So the god of the sacrificial fire was named Ing. In the Sanskrit, yoga, his name is Agni, where we get the word ignition from in the Latin, because it's ignis in Latin and or Greek. I can't remember which. This is the sacred fire. So the Inglenook, your home fireplace, the Inglenook, the nook of the god Ing. Why is it the nook of the god Ing? It's because that's where we had the fires of the home. And so when you place, like in Christmas time, when you place stockings over the fire, you are, and you know how the stockings work. When I was a little kid, you would hang the stocking and you would put your name on it, and then you would go to bed and you'd dream about Santa Claus coming. You'd wake up and you'd run out to the fireplace, and hanging on the fireplace, your stocking, your Christmas stocking was filled with magical, wonderful toys and gifts. One of the things my parents did right is they did that. And my mom would do things. She'd put like cloves, cinnamon, oranges, and all kinds of cool stuff like that. And that really, the reason why I love that is because that's one of the things I loved as a little kid so much. But now that I look back on it, whether she knew it or not, she was vibrating with, that was an ancestral understanding. And so the reason why we put the pictures of our relatives, our parents, our grandparents, our whoever who have passed, We put them on the fireplace because that is the original altar of the home, the sacred fire, that same fire where you did a worship within the home to the gods, when you did sacrifice in the home to the gods, and the smoke of that fire going up to the heavens, that exchange of energy, because you're giving that power to the gods. That exchange of energy is what is going to bring in whatever it is that you want. You can call it answers to your prayers, or you can call it manifesting your intention. But this is, again, part of the science. Spirituality is a science. And if you can't practically bring it and use it in your life, in my opinion, it's worthless. And that's why I treat it like a science. So we're talking about the ancestors today, worshiping the ancestors. That is one way that we still worship the ancestors today, whether you realize it or not. When you put stockings on your fireplace, or when you put the pictures of your relatives on your fireplace, you are worshiping the ancestors. You are putting them in the most sacred place in the home, which is the place of the sacred fire, the Ingel Nook, the nook of the god Ing. So why do we do that? If you listen to modern religious people, they'll tell you that that's an old superstition. And of course, why are you praying to ancestors? They're just people. They can't do anything for you. You should only pray to the one, almighty bearded judgment figure in the sky. So why do we worship the ancestors? And I know that the resurgence of paganism and heathenism, where people are trying to revive their ancestral understandings, that maybe they have an experience of what it's like to worship the ancestors. Maybe it's just, I want to do what they used to do, and so they're trying to do that. While I'm on that subject, I'm going to tell you why these things are coming about. Why are we seeing a resurgence in shamanism, paganism, heathenism? Why is there a push for the traditional understandings? So for this, I draw from the Vedic perspective, which is the ancient East Indian, which is the precursor to Hinduism and yoga, was Vedic. In the Vedic tradition, there are things called yugas, which means time periods, eons, we could call them that. And these time periods last for about 25,000 years, depending on which scholar you listen to. And the time period that was called Kali Yuga, which means the time of darkness, was when our solar system was orbiting around the central, I don't know if it's the center of the universe or the center of our galaxy, but at the center of either one of those places, I'm not sure which, is the most concentrated power of spirit. If you want to call it God, you can call it God. And our solar system is orbiting that. So Kali Yuga was the time, if this is the center of the universe and this is our solar system, when we were furthest away, that was Kali Yuga. In Kali Yuga, it is said that human beings were only 25% connected to their spiritual essence, and 75% of their essence was in darkness. And so this is why it was the most evil period. A lot of people think we are in Kali Yuga. We are not in Kali Yuga. We are in Dvapara Yuga. Kali Yuga at its height was in the middle of the Middle Ages. And what was happening in the Middle Ages? The imperial Catholic Christian takeover of ancient spirituality was happening. People were being put to death. People were being flayed alive. People were forced to swallow snakes. All kinds of horrible things. And if you didn't, that is if you refused to convert to the new religion. This is what they did. Of course, most people would convert long before that happened because they wanted to fit in, or they needed to make business, or you couldn't function without being part of the in crowd. And so that's where we, as a society, Western society, walked away from our worship of the ancestors. And it was seen as one of the most evil things that you could do. And there's a story, and I've shared this before, and I can't remember where I read it, but it's a historical story. I think it's from a priest about 1000 AD, and he's in somewhere in Scandinavia. And there was a wealthy landowner who was a pagan, which means that he worshipped the ancestral tradition, which means he worshipped his ancestors. But he wanted to fit into society, and he wanted to be able to be more successful as a businessman, and this was the thing to do. If you wanted to be successful, if you wanted to be a politician, if you wanted to be a king, then you had to convert to the new religion. And so he chose to do that. So the Catholic priest shows up, and he's got all his accoutrements, and he did what Catholic priests do, is he was shaking the holy water onto everything, in the house, especially all the places of power, all the places that were used for worship. And our ancestors used to worship trees. And trees had a strong connection to ancestral worship. And so he was going to all the trees and the standing stones on this guy's property, and he's saying his prayer, and he's driving away the evil spirits, because that's what they did. So this landowner that night goes to bed, and he has a dream where one of his ancestors, I don't know if it was his father or his grandfather or some of them, said, "Why are you getting rid of us? We're here to help you." And so it's an understanding in ancient tradition that the ancestors would stay with you and empower you. I have a personal idea of what I think that really means, because I'm having some experiences now that has sort of really confirmed for me some of my suspicions about what this thing really is. And I'm going to share with you some of that. So let's talk about the Hamingja spirit. Hamingja spirit. This is again coming from the ancient pre-Christian Nordic tradition. And the Hamingja spirit, Hamingja is sometimes translated as luck. In fact, nowadays, in modern times, as I understand it, if there's somebody from Scandinavia wants to correct me, I'm happy for that. But as I understand it, even in modern times, when you use the word Hamingja, you just mean luck, just a generic word for luck. But it comes back to this idea that your luck comes from your ancestors. And, depending on how strong your ancestors were and how strong your connection is to them, that will determine how powerful your luck is. And this is important because I'm making a connection here. And as you know, those who die in battle go to Valhalla, which means those who live fearlessly are the ones that achieve enlightenment. It's also important, if you live fearlessly, you will empower your children and your descendants. If you live cowardly, you are cutting yourself off from not only the power of the spirit, but the power of your ancestors. And your children are going to be cursed as a result of that. Not like the biblical curse that somebody's throwing a curse on you, but the lack of spiritual power that is handed down, if that's taken away, that's as bad as a curse. So it's even more important if you have children, if you have family members, and it's not just your children, it's your family members, it's your spouses, it's your friends, it's your cousins. If you do not live a powerful, fearless, noble, spiritual life, you are cutting those off, from your ancestors when you leave. Because what happens, this is what I've just revealed to me in the past couple of days. What you do while you are here is more important than who you are. And this is the difference between what you do with your life and what your ego says about you. And this is why being egotistical is such a shame, because it's not about, not being proud of yourself or full of yourself. As you know, I have a very high opinion of myself. And to be honest, that high opinion of myself has saved my life. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't be here today. I would not be walking on this planet. And I've seen what's happened to fellow family members who did not have a high opinion of themselves, meaning confidence. I'm not talking about insecure ego, that's something else, but confidence in yourself. If you do not live fearlessly as though you are willing to die in battle, you are cutting your family and your descendants off from the power that you are here to leave. And how you live your life, what you do with your life, creates a gift of power. While you are alive, you get to live in the midst of that projection of your power. So you get to mistakenly believe that you are this power, which is perfectly fine because that gives you more confidence to continue to go out and live your life with power and fearlessness. But when you leave this world, what is going to happen is that your own power that you have surrounded yourself with, which is your deeds, that begins to split off from your soul. Your soul begins to split off from the other bodies that you have. You have multiple bodies, multiple selves. Your soul begins to split off from that, and what ends up happening is that power then begins to be distributed. And have you ever noticed that? Anybody who has been in the room when somebody has died, somebody close to you, and you feel power coming off of them. Has anybody ever had that experience? This is the Hamingja. This is what the Hamingja is. Now the thing about the Hamingja, the luck spirit, is that you can give your Hamingja to somebody else if you want. You can willing it to somebody. So let's say, you've got your Hamingja from whomever. If you wanted to, you can make a ritual and will it to your kids, or you can give it to your friend. There's an ancient story about Vikings on a ship, and they're doing whatever Vikings do on a ship. And as they're, sailing along in the sea, a couple of them are looking out over the ocean, and they see this woman spirit. She's walking on the water behind the ship. And the guy says, "Do you see that?" He says, "Yeah, I do see that." And the guy says, "Yeah, that's my Hamingja." He says, "Well, what's wrong with you? Why is it out there?" He says, "I don't want it." He says, "Can I have it?" He says, "Yeah, you can have it." He got that Hamingja spirit. So let me tell you what I think the Hamingja is. I do not think the Hamingja is a conscious entity in the same way that you think of a conscious entity, like the ghost. The Hamingja is not the ghost of your ancestor. However, it will have a consciousness, and it will have a personality, and it will have an awareness, and it will be able to work on your behalf behind the scenes in ways that you can't imagine. And it will bring things to you, opportunities and people and wealth and business. This is one of the things the Hamingja will do for you. And it will do it with the same character and with the same kind of techniques. Like, in other words, if it's the Hamingja that came from your grandfather, and it will have a similar personality. If he had a sense of humor, your Hamingja will have a sense of humor. It will make things happen in a way that you'll see the funniness in it. You'll see the humor in it. And I'm going to share with you something very personal from my end. So understand that this is not, I'm not just doing this to get, attention from you. But this is a very personal thing. As you know, if you've been following me, I lost my life partner about 9 months ago. And and I have been really struggling. I'll be honest with you. I've been really, really struggling with the idea of allowing myself to believe that she's still here with me. It's been very painful because I can't communicate to her in the way that I want, through a text or on the phone or, hear her voice. That's not available to me anymore, at least so far. And that's been very difficult. And so in order to protect myself, I have just decided that it doesn't work. It's impossible once they're gone. And here I am, a shaman. I'm a teacher. I work with the powers of the universe. I work with spirits. I work with the gods. And here I am. I was unwilling to accept the idea that I could communicate with her. And I've since gotten out of that, I guess, because maybe I'm healing and it's not so painful anymore. I'm able to get some distance, and then I can say maybe she is here, and maybe she's here in a way that I don't quite understand. But I'm going to leave myself open to that possibility. And then as I look, I see that things have been happening on our anniversary, which was just recently, and I shared it was very painful for me. I missed her a lot. I didn't see it coming. I'm like that. All of a sudden the day shows up, and why am I crying all the time and so upset? Oh, it's our anniversary. As I'm going to my meeting, and I go to my group where I go to with my group of people who I share myself with and who I hold myself accountable to, who help me. They hold up the mirror when I'm full of crap. As I step out of the car on the street, middle of Los Angeles, right there in the street next to the curb, next to my foot, is this. I don't know if you can see it. A huge amethyst. A huge amethyst. What is the likelihood of that? As I'm sitting there thinking about her and, thinking about sharing this with my friends and trying to, get the pain out so I can get some help, I step off the curb and there's this, right there. And that sort of woke me up to, maybe you need to accept the idea that she is here in ways you don't quite understand. And some other things have been happening recently that have been blowing my mind. Just every single day recently, things are happening, things are coming together, and it's really quite overwhelming and a little frightening at times. And there's some stuff going on in my personal life right now, which I'm not going to get specific on, but it's really blowing me away. Things I didn't think were really all that possible. And I'm starting to think maybe that is a result of me saying yes to her. Like, yes, I don't know exactly who or how or where you are, but I'm going to accept that you're in my life and that you are continuing to bless me and do what you used to do when you were alive, which was empower me. We could have that whole discussion about what the power of the feminine is. But I tell you, when you get that power of the feminine in your life and you find a good one, there is nothing more empowering. And, I'll tell you, guys, if you find a woman, a conscious, empowered woman, and you allow her, this is important, listen to the words I'm using, and you allow her to love you, you have to allow her to do that, you can become more powerful than anything in the universe. My phone agrees. It just agreed with us here. So here was my experience that, and again, this is very personal, so understand that. But I think it's important to know. This is where I learned that when a person is leaving this life, their power, which is the projection of their energy, which is who they are, not just who they are, but what they do, what they project, their values, and all these things have direct connection to your actions. You can't have any of this without action, the actions that you take. That as somebody is dying, their soul begins to split off from that energy, and while they are still here in the body, they begin to unconsciously, without realizing it, they start to give away that energy, the power of their projection, to those that are still left behind. And I can remember at least one instance when I felt this happening with Lisa. And this was before we really knew. Things were starting to look bad, and I was starting to get, this might not go the way that I want. She was still holding on to the belief. She held on to the very end. She refused to accept it until the very end. But, your spirit knows what's going on. Your soul knows what's going on. And I felt this power coming off of her into my aura. And it was an amazing feeling. At the time, I thought I was just having some feelings of love for her, which was fine. And we did have a very powerful and passionate, like, energetic connection. When we would get together, it was like, but I could feel the energy coming off of her and coming into my aura. And there you go. The phone agrees with me. So I haven't forgotten that. Now, I thought something else was happening, and I think I was wrong, of course, because in the moment, a lot of things going on, and you're not seeing things clearly. But looking back on it, that is what I think is what was happening. I believe that energy is around me all the time. And I believe that energy has her personality. It has her, it's not necessarily her, although I don't count that out. And the reason why I don't think it's necessarily her is because the soul has its own destiny. She might be, by now she might be, a baby being born somewhere, for all I know. She's got other things her soul has to do than just sit around and follow me around. She's got other things to do. But she left a very real energy with me that now I can talk to and feel and connect with. And since I started doing that, things are blowing up in my life. Like stuff that I just didn't think were possible are starting to happen, and it's really starting to scare the crap out of me. And I share that with you because I want you to understand that when you allow yourself to act fearlessly and to allow that power to manifest, it's going to scare the crap out of you too. Let me get rid of the idea that is floating around in the New Age media that when you are just focusing on love and light and everything is wonderful, that things just happen and it's all beautiful. No, man, you're going to have to transform to be able to enlarge yourself to be able to handle the success, the transformation that comes to you. People ask, well, if there's all this, then why are so many people miserable and unhappy? It's because they choose to be. And I'm not saying that with judgment. I understand it. It's much easier to stay, where you're at than it is to expand and to grow and to become something new, something more. It's frightening. And it's more frightening for some than others for all various different reasons. But you can't go through it without facing at least some fear. So I'm experiencing some of that. And I share that with you for the same reason I always share my negative feelings, which is even though I'm the teacher and I'm the master and I accept that mantle, I'm still just as human as you. So if I can do it, so can you. So if you want what I have, you got to do what I do. And part of that is being honest about what you're feeling. Don't pretend and try and be something that you're not. Don't pretend to not have any problems. Don't pretend to not have any anger or any fear. Don't pretend that you have difficulties like anybody else. Be human. And so that leads me to the next thing which I want to talk about, which is the projection. Now, there's another word for projection, and maybe I'll be able to make a connection here. I don't want to put the mind effort into it right now, but there's the projection that we talk about in Vedic astrology, by the way, right here, astrology.thunderwizard.com. If you want to find out what your projection is, which is what the world wants to see from you, and if you allow yourself to project that, that is really the source of all of your success. And if you know what that is, then you can find out ways that you're sabotaging your own success by not projecting. Now, that's a different projection. Maybe it's the same thing, but for right now, we'll say it's different. The projection I'm talking about is you've come here to do something. You are a soul, and you've come here and you've incarnated in this physical body, and in this physical body are two other selves. There's the higher self, which has its own conscious awareness, which connects you to the higher realm. And then you have the lower self, which is what most ghosts are, when the lower self gets squished out onto the the earthly plane and walks around and says, my name is, George Washington, and I need to get to the Delaware River, that's probably somebody's lower self. That's not actually George Washington's soul. So we come in here and we incarnate with these other three selves in this body. And we have a path that we have made a vow. We talked about this last time. Our soul, before it incarnates, makes a pact, a vow, a sacred vow to the universe and to all beings in the universe that they are going to follow a certain path, that they are going to walk. And the way that you know what that path is that when you think about it, it brings you great joy. Now again, I picked my words very carefully. I didn't say that when you do it, it brings you great joy, although it inevitably will. I said when you think about it, it brings you great joy. And that is because when you know what your soul path is supposed to be. Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to go and create this center for healing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on a barge with the, whatever that is. And you go, that's my passion. I think that's great. It gives me so much joy to think about it. That's your soul vow. Now you know what it is. Then you start taking action to go make that happen. And all of a sudden that happy feeling turns into fear and insecurity and all kinds of other things. So that's why I say that. When you think about it, it gives you joy. Not necessarily when you go after it, because sometimes going after it, there's going to be some challenges. And when you are doing that, when you are walking that path, you are projecting power. Because, and now I'm putting this all together as I talk to you. When you make that vow, remember that a sacred vow is always an exchange of energy, which is why our ancestors sacrificed goats and pigs, because they were worth a heck of a lot. And that was the most important thing I had. And a guy, he only has one pig, but he wants a wife and he wants to have his own estate. And he, so he gets his one pig and he slaughters it and he sacrifices it to the gods on the sacrificial fire, and all of the rest of the village are invited, and he has to share the meat of that pig with the rest of the village, and by that way the power of the sacrifice goes to everybody, which always benefits you. And that exchange of energy with other people and with the gods through the smoke, the gods say, yes, boom, we are going to give you that. This is your vow. Your soul vowed a sacrifice to the universe. It said, I want to grow in power and I want to learn. I am going to incarnate as a human being, and my sacrifice is that I will sacrifice to walk that path that brings me joy, and I will bring joy to others as I do it. And in exchange for that projection, the universe gives you success, gives you resources in order to follow that, and gives you joy, and of course you learn and you gain power. That path, as you go, you project that energy, because that resources will be given to you from the universe, which includes spiritual energy. And that energy will be projected through you as you follow your path. Now, you're not aware of this because you're digging that ditch or building that bridge or whatever it is you're supposed to do to create that. And you're thinking about what you got to do, and your ego's all wrapped up, and who am I, and should I be doing this, and gosh, this because I'm tired, and then it's really exciting and all that. But what you don't realize in that moment is that you are projecting power onto this earthly plane. That power that you are projecting on this earthly plane, which has your name attached to it, when you leave this world, that power will stay and your name will stay with it. Your name will change because your soul is not your human name. Your soul has another name and it goes off and it does its own thing. But your name, which is attached to that energy, which will have your vibration and your consciousness to it, will continue to stay here. And that is what people are worshiping. And I had this experience, and it's going to sound, maybe it won't, but perhaps it will sound strange to you, how this all came to me. I saw this. This was 2 nights ago. And I was sitting at home and late at night, and I couldn't sleep, and I was watching, and as I'm realizing it, the reason why I couldn't sleep, I didn't see it then, was because there was some pretty serious energy coming my way in certain areas, and I didn't know what that was. So if you have one of those nights where, why the heck can't I sleep, that may be one of the reasons. Something's coming. So I couldn't sleep, and I started watching a documentary about the rock group Black Sabbath. I don't know if you're familiar with it. They're obviously, very well known. They did their very last live tour, and the last concert of their live tour, which meant this was the last time that they were going to be playing their songs ever again. So for me, a surfer kid, California, who was born in 1963 and in the 70s, going through junior high and high school and listening to Black Sabbath, you may not realize it, but they, and this, just indulge me here for a moment. Just let me take you on this journey. You may, depending on how old you are, Black Sabbath, they were just doing their thing. They were just, four, working class guys in Birmingham, England, who were just playing rock and roll that they wanted to play. They didn't think of themselves as master musicians. They were just wanting to do what they did. And at the time, their music was so hardcore that they couldn't get gigs in London, as I understand. And, in the beginning, people were telling them they didn't know what they were doing, learn how to play music and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the rest is history. They became the groundbreaking band that not only that started the revolution of acid rock, heavy metal, but also hardcore punk took their lead from them. Without these guys, we wouldn't have heavy, hard rock as we know it today. I mean, there hasn't been a fundamental change. I've been listening to, just rock and roll, since I was a kid, 50, almost 55 years old now. And I can tell you categorically, there has not been a major change in music. You can go and download some rock song from somebody, and they may have a unique sound, but it won't be fundamentally different from what was happening then in the 60s and especially the early 70s. So understand that those of us who were buying these records and listening to them, we were listening to something absolutely that had never, ever existed on the face of the planet before. And it was so powerful for us. And of course, all the things connected to, being hippies and all that kind of stuff and, rebelling, and everybody goes through that. But whatever music is coming out now, I can tell you the vibe of whatever rebellion they think they're doing is nothing compared. Because, when we would listen to it, people just 10 years older than us, 20 years older than us would be like, what the heck is that? What is that music? Can't do that now. Rock and roll today is almost the same as it was back then. So point being, I'm giving you this to get you somewhere else, which is I had a strong connection to it. It was very empowering for me. But at the time, I remember thinking and feeling that they probably weren't very good musicians. They didn't seem very sophisticated. Of course, I'm using my words now, but they probably weren't that sophisticated. They were just really hard, right? And that's how people looked at them. And you viewed them the same way that we view a lot of music now. It's fun now, but it's going to be a fad and it'll blow over. And how many bands don't exist anymore? They had one hit, or they had hits for a little while and they don't exist anymore. They just faded into nothingness. Black Sabbath is not one of those bands. Black Sabbath has stood the test of time. if you're into that kind of thing, which of course I am. So I'm watching them live, they're live there. I'm watching it on my television, but I'm watching that, and I'm having this intense experience, and I'm starting to cry because my gods of rock and roll are playing, and I'm aware that that is the last time they're ever going to play that song, ever. And I'm watching Tony Iommi playing his guitar, and I'm watching the drummer, and I'm watching the bassist, and I'm soaking it all up. And then of course they'll go to the audience, and the audiences, they're weeping. They're like weeping, and it's like, and I say they're worshiping the gods. And it dawned on me, this is the end of an era. There will never be another band like that will do what those guys did. There'll be something else, we'll do some other thing. But in terms of what they did and the impact that they had on music and on society, that is gone forever. And I understood that is what ancestor worship is. It wasn't them. I mean, you take Tony Iommi, you take Ozzy Osbourne, you take them off the stage and you talk to them, and they're ex-drug addict, old people, whatever, and there's really nothing all that amazing about them as just tiny little people. But what they projected, what they did was godly, meaning, supernatural. And the power that they followed their path. They followed the Thunder Wizard philosophy, which is that you live your life fearlessly. You go after what gives you the greatest joy, fearlessly, and if you die doing it, so much the better. If you die in battle, you go to Valhalla. And they did that. They didn't care about, who thought what or whatever. They just did the music they wanted to do, which was so revolutionary at the time and was so, the music industry in the very beginning was telling them, you guys have no idea what you're doing. And now look at them. And there will never be punk rock, hardcore punk rock owes their existence to them. All rock and roll of all kinds has been either directly or indirectly influenced by what they were doing. And I understood as those, people of all ages, you had guys my age and guys older, and you had kids in their, their teens and their 20s, and they're all weeping as they're watching this band play these songs that we've been listening to for 50 years. And I saw it. I said, that's ancestor worship right there. And what happened when they said, this is our last tour, this is the last time we'll be playing together, their souls split off from their projection. And now their projection can continue. When they die, and may they continue to live a long life, that will still be there, and people will continue to play that. And especially if you tell them, understand, let me explain to you how crazy revolutionary this music was. For them to listen to that and have that same experience, that's the same as us when we worship our ancestors. And when we talk about the feats of our ancestors. And of course we do it in all kinds of other different ways. War heroes. And I'm saying to you, it's more than just this idea of, worshiping your ancestors. Like, I gotta call out my, my folkish heathen brethren, who I believe those who are racialists are making an incredibly stupid mistake, thinking that worshiping your ancestors is worshiping them because they're the same race that you are. It's incredibly asinine. The minimization of what they accomplished and who they are is offensive to me, and I will go so far as to say it's offensive to our ancestors. Because that is not what they were. The color of their skin had nothing to do with what they projected onto this planet. Anyway. Got on my high horse there for a minute, so I'm going to take a little bit of a break here. If you're new to the channel, here's what I want you to do. I want you to ask a question. I'm not interested in your thoughts or your opinions. I don't need a chorus. I don't need you to say yay or no or here's what I think. I will ignore all of those. I am only going to respond to questions. If you want to ask me a question, you write the word question and then write your question and I will respond to it. Think about your question before you ask it, because if it's a stupid question, I'm going to tell you. Think about what it is that you're really wanting to know. Listen to your feelings and ask your questions from your emotions. Otherwise, I have to do things like, why do you ask that question? And then I'm going to psychoanalyze you in front of everybody, and nobody wants that. So that's what's going to happen here. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back. And then we'll talk some more. So I'll be back in a couple minutes here. Alrighty, so we are back. Let me take a look and see again what we got. Again, questions only. I appreciate the well-wishings and the comments, and I don't appreciate the not so well-wishing comments, but I would much prefer just to see questions. Saves me and everybody else time. So let's see here. There's me writing down a bunch of stuff. Emerson's Coffee Bite question, teacher, what are some of the ways we can enhance our ancestor worship with Qigong and medicine wheel? Well, Qigong in and of itself will enhance, in and of itself is kind of ancestor worship because it's through our energy body that we connect to the power of the ancestors. So when you're doing Qigong, if you want to call upon the ancients and you want to call upon their power, that is a good time to do it. You know, Qigong just in general is like the biggest, steroid vitamin boost you can get for anything magical, whether it's making yourself feel better emotionally, spiritually, physically, whether it is about intending, whether it's about prayer, whether it's whatever it is that you're doing. It's just power. Qigong is just pure power, pure spiritual power. So just by doing that, you are connecting to the ancestors. If you want to, while you're doing Qigong, invite the ancestors, they will come. Especially if you're doing celestial Qigong, you go to qigong.thunderwizard.com. Celestial Qigong is a Qigong that I personally have created, which was, it connects you directly to the ascended masters who are also the ancestors. So the second answer to your question is that when you're working with the thunder wheel or the 8-sided direction wheel here, and by the way, that's what, when you go to thunderwizard.com, where is it? When you go to thunderwizard.com, that's where I go into depth teaching exactly how to use the 8 directions and create a thunder wheel. And anytime you do that, just by doing that, you're connecting to the ancestors too. So this is the thing. But if you directly want to talk to the ascended ancestral spirits, you face northwest. And that's all you have to do. Just figure out where northwest is and just sit there. And if you want, put a little, a libation in front of you, as an invitation, because that is also the direction of the moon. And the element for the moon is water, things like milk, things like that. So you can give a little offering of tea or milk or honey water or something like that. And then just sit there and meditate and ask especially like under a full moon, I mean, that's huge. And ask the ascended masters who are ancestors, my ancestors called the elves, the shining ones. They're the ascended masters of the human race. Just sit there and meditate and ask for them to guide you. If you have a specific question, you can ask. But one of the best ways to work with them is just simply to, focus on your crown and just to breathe long and deep and just simply say, what advice can you give me about me following my true path? And as you sit there, you may get kind of and they're very, what's the word I want to use? They're very subtle and they're very non-invasive. The elves never come and point their fingers and tell you what to do. They're like, the kind grandparents that, if you're causing problems, they're just going to get up and walk away. They'll let the parents deal with it. But if you go to grandma and grandpa and you say, Grandpa, tell me a story. Grandpa, how did you learn how to fish? And grandpa will tell you. He'll say, I'll tell you a secret. And maybe he'll pull a little candy out of his pocket. Don't tell your mom. Here. And he'll say, let me tell you a secret. If you really want to catch a fish, you do this. And he'll tell you some special little thing that he learned from his experience that, that would take you decades to learn, and he's going to give that to you as your grandfather. And they will always give you information that will not only tell you how you can better treat yourself to be more healthy and more constructive, but you will always get a sense of how that beneficial activity for yourself, how that benefits others. And you may get a message about, hey, when you do this, when you walk around and you smoke crack all day, it really does bad things to you, but here's what it does to the people around you. There's never a message that they give that won't connect you to not only what is best for you, but how that behavior will benefit others. There's never a disconnect there. So to answer your question, those are how you can use the thunder wheel to worship the ancestors. Yeah, just me talking about it like that. And I'm facing, no, that's the other direction. All right. Let's see. So she also goes on to say, I'm a rune student, so how can I use runes to assist ancestor communication? Well, the runes themselves are ancestor communication. In fact, just every time you do a rune reading, if you want rune readings from me, go to runereadings.thunderwizard.com. Whenever you do a rune reading, you are asking the ancestors to advise you. Okay? So this is shamanism in general. And by the word shamanism, I mean any tradition, indigenous tradition from anywhere in the world that has an unbroken connection into prehistory. Any tradition like that, in and of itself, whenever you do it, it's always connecting to the ancestors. And I'll say this, especially for those of us in the West, that there is a lot of damage that's been done in the ancestral realm. That split. When our ancestors split off from their ancestors, like I gave you the story about the guy who had the Catholic priest come in and put the holy water on the sacred stones around his property, and then at night they said, "What are you doing? Why are you driving us away? We're here to help you." Caused a lot of damage on the ancestral realm. But what ends up happening is that those people who broke from the ancestors, thinking that they were becoming Christians or getting saved or whatever, when they die, not only their energy, but their souls, when they die, they realize the damage that they've caused to, for thousands. I mean, it is my belief that breaking from the ancestral traditions is responsible for all the evils in the world. Maybe that's my own, projection or, generalization, but, global warming, deforestation. Our ancestors, particularly my ancestors, and this is true for everybody, but they worshipped trees. They believed that trees had a spirit in them, and that those people whose job it was to go out and be woodcutters, which is a very important job because people needed wood and people needed lumber, people needed wood. It's not that they didn't cut down trees and use them, but they never cut down more than they needed. And the woodcutters would go out into the forest and they would ask the trees, which trees can I cut, which ones can't I? And they would promise the spirit of the tree, which was called a woodwife. It was a feminine spirit. They promised the spirits of the trees that they would help them find a home, and they would put little runes. They would carve symbols. People keep asking me what the symbol is. I don't know what the symbol was, but they would carve a symbol onto the tree, which would be a map for that spirit to go find another place to live. And then they would cut the tree down. So I don't know what got me on that, but I'm really kind of out of it right now. I mean, talking about the ancestors, I'm in another realm. I'm not really completely in my body here as I talk to you. But anyway, hopefully I answered your question there. Donna Marie B333 question. I need the runes certification address. Alrighty. Rune certification. Let me test it. Let me test it right now. Rune certification. Yeah. That's it. Rune certification, no space. .thunderwizard.com. I think that's right. Rune certification.thunderwizard.com. Thank you for asking. There you go. All right. So what else? Christina Chimo question. Did my questions get through? I don't know. When did you ask them? What questions? That came through. No message retracted there. So I don't know. Apparently not. All right, where was I? Okay, so here. Emerson's Coffee Bite question. Is mediumship possible, and what is the difference between swish or save and channeling a dead person? Well, God, could you ask some tougher questions? Jeez, I'm being sarcastic. Those are tough questions. Is mediumship possible? I've had differing opinions about mediumship. I will say that mediumship, if somebody's a true medium, I do not believe at any point in time will the spirits or the ancestors allow them or propel them to become television stars. I think that is at the very least a really offensive, profane use of that gift. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be successful and they shouldn't be paid for their services. I'm just saying that kind of sensationalism is, let me give you another example of that. I studied in what would be considered a shamanic martial art. In my experience, it's easily the most lethal martial art I've ever come across. But in order to get that power, you have to actually do some spiritual work and some other kinds of energy work to get that stuff going. Now, I was given specific I was given specific instructions by my teachers as well as by the spirits themselves. I remember getting that the first time. I felt something tell me, if you misuse this, we will take it away from you. And I saw this, I saw a vision of how powerful it was. I knew a guy who was a power lifter, and he was also a mixed martial artist. And he was, he would do cage fights and all that kind of stuff, and he tried to get into the UFC and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, he was very good at it, very good mixed martial artist. He was also a Bagua practitioner. And Bagua is a similar kind of, deep level Bagua is a totally shamanic martial art. And he would try, and he would say to me, no, the real shamanic spiritual stuff is by far better than, MMA. But he says, I can't use it in the ring. And I asked him, why not? And he says, because when I step into the ring, if I try and bring that with me, I can feel that energy peel off of me. And then if I try and use it in the ring, I get my ass kicked. And he said it's really clear that the spiritual energy around that does not want to be sensationalized like that. That's not what it's for. So when it comes to mediumship, I think the same thing is true, that if somebody truly has that gift, they're going to be very respectful of that and they're not going to sensationalize it. I have had a lot of mixed experience with that. I have to say my experience up until now is that whenever somebody has unilaterally, without my permission, has driven up on me and said, I have a message for you from whomever, at best, it is something that I have unconsciously wanted to hear. And at worst, it's been an outright just mistake. That is so far from the truth. And then there's a middle ground where it's hard to tell what that means, but that's either, that could be a really good guess. In my case, I talk so much. I have, how many thousands of hours of me talking about myself and my personal experience that people could either unconsciously or consciously pick up information, and that could seep into their experience. So one of the most difficult things when it comes to mediums is that if somebody is a true medium, they have to be very conscious, meaning they have to be conscious of their own unconscious projections. Because I can think of in a few cases, with people who have claimed to have had visions, and I'm not pointing any one person out. I get people emailing me, and I get a lot of people, especially when my partner passed. I got a lot of people wanting to help me with, she's telling me to tell you, and of course most of it was just all nonsense. But what we need to understand is that in order to be a medium, you have to have a clean lower self. So you have three selves. You have the upper self, the middle self, and the lower self. I'm touching my navel. In the navel, you have your unconscious mind and your subconscious mind. In your unconscious and your subconscious mind are all of your own narcissistic issues, all of your own narcissistic fantasies, all of your unresolved fears, all of your family issues, your childhood issues. So what ends up happening is that this is where mediums will get their information, because the way it works is the higher self takes information from the ethers and gives it to the lower self. if the lower self is clean, that information goes directly to the middle self, and you have this experience of, I am talking to the gods, or I'm talking to whomever. If you have unresolved issues, which, by the way, if you want the one thing, like, how do I resolve my issues? The one thing, go after your soul desire, regardless of how painful it is, or how, fearful you are, or how many people reject you. If you do that, you will, by the nature of doing that, you will clean all that up. And for those that are living in poverty and misery, and they can't seem to get healthy, and they can't seem to get their life together, same thing. That's because you are being hijacked by your own unconscious fears. And no matter how many times you say to yourself, I'm rich, I have a Mercedes, if you aren't able to take action on what gives you joy, you'll never be able to clean that up. And this is where we get into the middle zone of psychics who may have some power, but they are still unresolved. And so you never know what's coming out of them, if it's true, if it's false, if it's their own projection. I'm thinking of one person in particular who gave me some advice and said, this is what Lisa is telling you. And she said, this is what was going to happen. And I said, and I watched it, and that didn't happen. It never happened. But as I continued to work with that individual, we found out that this was this person's fantasy for themselves. Now, I didn't connect that for them. I connected the dots myself. I went, oh, that's why this person told me that. Because what was really going on was they were projecting onto me what they wanted for themselves. And because they have this ability in their lower self to pick up and channel information, they don't know the difference between their own self-projected issue, their own narcissism, and an actual spirit. Because to them, because they have, it's like a muscle, because that muscle is in them, it's their own spirit talking to them, and they can't tell the difference. And that's why it's so important to be conscious, because when you're conscious of all of your issues, what it is that you want, how you project yourself onto others, then you will know when you are having a vision that's not coming from somewhere else, but it's your own narcissism coming up. Now, having said that, there's been a couple of people whom I trust who have said, listen, you got to talk to so-and-so. They are the real thing. So I do plan on doing that, and I think it's important. I'm going to pay them money, and I'm not going to tell them. And I'll see if something comes up, and I'll know. I will know if I'm, if my partner's coming through or not. So to answer your question, is it real? For now, I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say that I believe that it is possible and that it could be real. Up until now, I haven't had that experience yet. All the psychics that I've gone to, and this is a guy who, I do rune readings, which I don't think are the same. I'm not a psychic reader, but I will give rune readings, and when I look at rune readings, I interpret what's in the runes, which is, again, a science. I'm not trying to project anything. I'm looking at what there, and this is what that rune means, and this placement and that. And then it, ironically, it's usually, spot on, and like, oh my God, that's so amazing. Well, it's not me. I'm not having a psychic vision or hearing voices. That is coming from the ancestors through the runes to them. I've got very little to do with it. But even so, this is why I can't do readings for myself, because I'll ask a question for myself, but because I have a personal agenda and I have something I want out of it, the reading will, I can't, lots of times the readings are just absolutely, totally wrong, and that's because I have an agenda. And so that gets in the way of it. It muddies the reception. And I think when you have a personal agenda, the gods and the ancestors and the spirits just say, hey man, we're not going to play. Just like my friend I told you about, who is both an MMA practitioner and he's a Bagua guy. But when he goes into the ring, if he wants to bring his shamanic martial art with him, that peels off of him and he can feel them say, nope, we're not coming in with you, you're on your own. And so then he has to use regular mixed martial arts to be able to, and he's very good at it. I don't know if I answered your question or not. Let me see. What is the difference between, I don't know what swish is or seethe and channeling a dead person? I don't know. It depends on what you mean by a dead person. Here's my belief on what ghosts are. The ghost of somebody walks in the room, or the ghost of somebody is haunting that. I'm not saying it's not haunted. It's not the soul of that person. We have three selves: upper self, middle self, lower self. The lower self is where we hold our human identity. Michael William Denny, the identity and the ego of that is centered in the lower self. When I die and all of these selves come apart, the lower self wanders the earth. And if you do it right, the lower self will go into the earth, will become an earth spirit, live in the trees and the rocks, become, maybe just kind of dissipate. I don't know what they do. Perhaps they live on, and I believe that lower selves have the ability to become souls at some point. So, it's part of their evolution. They are born and they're, put together with another human. So you may end up being reincarnated with somebody else's lower self. I don't know. This is all up in the air for me. I haven't made a final decision about that. But I definitely have the opinion that ghosts are lower selves, because the lower self, like your unconscious mind, by the way, people ask, well, why do things keep happening this way? Well, your unconscious mind is built on decisions that you make, especially as a little kid. And if as a little kid, let's say you almost drown, right? Then you make the decision that water is scary. That's a decision that you make in your lower self. Then you grow up and you have a fear of water. Like, you don't know why, but you have this crazy fear of water. That's because you made a decision. It got put into your unconscious mind, meaning unconscious, meaning you're not consciously aware of it. And then you have this irrational fear of water. It's because your unconscious mind is still that little 4-year-old that slipped into a puddle and almost drowned. There's no time. Your unconscious mind does not know from time. This is, again, why, when people get old and they get senile, they call for their mother. My mother did it. When she was on her deathbed, 80-something years old, and her mother had been dead for who knows how long, she was calling for her mom. When is my mother coming? Because she was, losing it, and the unconscious mind doesn't know from time. So when the lower self, which contains the ego identity of somebody, when it gets squished out violently, or the person dies in an unconscious way, or the person dies miserable and disconnected from their soul, then their lower self gets squished out onto the earthly plane, and it still thinks it's 1875. They still think that they're so-and-so, and they have to find, like where I grew up, there was a lighthouse that supposedly had a ghost of a woman who got jilted on by her lover on her wedding night or something like that. And so if you would go out there, you would see this woman jump off the cliff, and people would report this woman jumping off the cliff, and so it was apparently this ghost. This ghost would do the same thing every night. It would jump off the cliff. That's a lower self that is completely oblivious to everything, and oblivious to the passage of time. And that's not the soul. The soul isn't that stupid. So when you say the spirit of a dead person, you don't know. You could be channeling somebody's lower self. I don't think that, Napoleon Bonaparte's soul needs to be coming down and channeling through people in a seance. I just don't think that souls are that petty. They've got other things to do. A lower self, on the other hand, that's different. Lower self can hang out. I think lower selves, they hang out for a few hundred years at best. And then they start to let go, and they start to forget. And then they become a nature spirit. And Anyway, that's my thoughts about that. So what's the difference? I don't know. You'd have to give me some specifics. And again, I know that you have this ability. This is not an ability that I have, nor is it an ability that I want. So I'm just giving you a lot of my opinion based on observation more than on personal experience. Anyway, I can tell you that you can channel people, and I did when my last ditch effort as an actor years ago. I wrote a movie, and I wrote a part for a serial killer, and I played the guy. And as I was writing it, I thought I want to make this a really extreme character, so I didn't edit myself. And I started writing about this really intense, insane, he had multiple personalities. And when I filmed it, I actually had to chain myself to the chair so that I could really violently go in and out of character. I was one of those people. As I was doing research on serial killers, I'd already written this guy, I'd written his name, and it was really out there. I won't tell you what it was, but what he went through and what he supposedly did was really out there. And I thought it was too extreme, to be honest with you. But I said, but you know what? I was desperately trying to make a name for myself, so I went off, really went off outside the box. As I was doing research, I came upon a serial killer in prison with the exact name, the exact same issues, the exact same thing had happened to him. And I went, oh my God, I channeled this guy. So when I performed him, I really felt I had to do him justice. And it really made me crazy. In fact, it took me weeks. I had to decompress from that. I will never, if I ever act again, I'll never act. I'll never do one of those characters again because it just messed with me. My shamanic ability to be able to do that just made me crazy. And it when you get into the mind of a serial killer to the extent that you get it and it makes sense to you, it's a horrible place to be. Horrible. Oh. So you can channel people, you can channel live people and dead people, but the question is why do it? That's my question. So again, I don't know enough about what your experience is or what that is to really get into it. That's my own personal thing. I don't want to do that for my own personal sake, and I have doubts about the efficacy or the value of it. I'm not saying it can't be valuable and that it can't be done by the right person, but they've got to be really qualified and they got to be called to it and they got to be really conscious. Otherwise, as I said, they could either be channeling something that they're not trying to channel, or they could be just simply projecting their own narcissistic garbage, which is what happens, by the way, with poltergeists. Poltergeists, more often than not, is a living person whose lower self is sneaking out of their body, and because they have unresolved major trauma. And you could look at not whenever, at least to my knowledge, but very often you will find people who are haunted by poltergeists are people who themselves went through crazy trauma as kids, raped or beat up or horrible things, and they have unresolved rage about it. And when they aren't paying attention or when they go to sleep, that part of their body, their lower self, comes out and harasses them. And harasses other people. But it's not a ghost. It's a living person's own lower self getting squished up. All right. Christina Chimo, question. So my coven priestesses, so bear in mind, I'm not a Wiccan. So I have no understanding about covens or any of that. So just know as I read this that, if I answer your question, it's not going to be based on any knowledge I have of that kind of paganism, because I don't, not that I have anything against it, I just have no experience in it. Question. So my coven priestesses talk about after we die, we are aimless spirits with no autonomy and willpower, because willpower to choose where to go in the afterlife doesn't exist. Obviously, I think that's nonsense. Forget the fact that they're coven priestesses. I don't care about that. I just completely disagree with that. That's not my experience, number one. Number two, does that make sense to you that the universe would work like that? What they're saying here, what I hear in that is a projection. That's their projection of how they are right now. That they are saying, they may not be aware of it, but their unconscious experience of themselves is that they themselves are aimless and have no autonomy and willpower, and they can't choose what they're doing in this life. And so they project that onto the other world. And of course, that makes for a lot more fun rituals if you want to do the Ouija board and get some poor spirit that's aimlessly running around and tap into all of that angst and all of that. I mean, there's a lot of addiction. That's why people watch horror movies and stuff like that, and that's why there's a lot of people who are into ghost hunting and, who get into all kinds of different forms of spirituality that focus on that, because they themselves feel aimless and hopeless and, disconnected. And so creating some kind of experience like that reinforces that chaos, that pain within them. In order to get past that, you have to own up to your life and say, I am responsible for everything in my life. Everything that happens is my own projection and my own creation. And that is completely opposite from somebody that says we have no autonomy or willpower and we don't know where we're going after we're dead. But it also, the assumption is that the universe is just completely arbitrary. I mean, to me, that kind of belief system is one step away from being an atheist. I mean, you might as well just be an atheist. So that's like an atheist who wants to have, some spiritual, get off on some kind of spiritual experience. It's like the atheist version of spirituality. That, yeah, we exist after we die, but there's nothing out there. It's just this empty thing, and we just sort of float into nothingness. And so when people ask me about the afterlife, and I tell them what my belief system is, which is I tend to, for the most part, share the same beliefs as my Hindu brothers and sisters, the Vedics. And not only because I have a lot of respect for that, because I believe that represents ancient Indo-European spirituality, that is true, not just because of that, but because it makes sense. The Abrahamic version that says that, God created you, and if you don't accept God's true name, then you're going to eternally suffer in torment. That doesn't make any sense. Why would a supreme being do that? It just doesn't make any sense at all. And it's arbitrary. And I don't believe the universe is arbitrary. So to say that when we die, we don't know where we go and we don't have any willpower is to say that the universe is arbitrary. And to me, that just doesn't make any sense. So that's why I, teach what I teach. And that's why I teach that reincarnation is not something that happens to you. It's not that you died and then you have this unpaid karmic debt. I'm using the word, consciously using it incorrectly, because most people, when they throw out karma and karmic debt, are using it incorrectly. What they mean is sin. They don't know the difference between karma and sin. That karma is something negative. Ooh, you did something bad, and so you have this negative karma. Karma is neither good nor bad. In fact, you have far more positive karma than negative karma, but because you're only worried about the negative stuff, you don't think about all the positive karma you have. It just means the reaction that you get. You take an action and something happens. If you take an action based on your soul desire, and I keep hammering this away, you will get a positive reaction, and you can call that positive karma. If you act out of alignment of your own soul, which means that you do damage to yourself, then you are going to incur a debt, which means that you're going to have to live through some crap to fix that imbalance within yourself. Whether that has to do with something that happens to you externally or not is beside the point. You're the one that created it. So that's why I say, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for, and a lot of Hindus disagree. There's a lot of different Hindu belief systems and a lot of different Hindu scriptures out there which say different things. So again, as I said in the beginning, my spirituality is based, number one, on my experience. Tell me what I can do with that. How can I apply that in my life, and how can I make it work for me? If I can't do that, it's worthless. It's a waste of time. I'm not interested. But if you tell me something and I practice it and holy crap, it works, then I'm going to keep it. And now it's a belief. I believe it because I can see it. It makes sense and it works. In my experience, the universe makes sense. It does not make sense for people to be born with no legs and that be their only life and have a miserable life. It makes sense to me that the soul, if it has the opportunity to reincarnate, said, you know what, I need to learn a lesson about this, that, or the other thing, so I'm going to give myself a challenge in this next life, which we, in this one life, we go, oh my God, that's so horrible that they're living through, and maybe it is. I get people who get furious with me when I say that if somebody is born in challenging circumstances, and what most people, and this will tell you about people's projection. Anytime somebody's upset with me about something I teach, it tells me everything about what their projection is, meaning how they feel about themselves unconsciously. So when I say this, people will say, yeah, but what about somebody who was raped as an infant? It happens, and it's horrible. Can I just say that? It is unthinkably horrible. I can't comprehend it. It makes me murderously rageful, and it makes me want to cry thinking about it. It does happen. So I have to make sense of that. The only thing that makes sense to me is that that soul decided it needed to experience something that would teach it something that I don't understand. And it chose to have that experience. I'm somebody, I went through a lot of trauma, nothing like that, but I went through a lot of trauma as a kid. And that is the only thing. So that's why that's the only thing that's helped me, is to take full responsibility. Because I've seen in my own life, when I don't take full responsibility, my life is miserable. I've seen other people who don't take responsibility, their lives are miserable. And you only have that choice. Your choice is either you are a victim or you are 100% responsible. Those are your only two choices. You can't pick the middle ground. So people who believe that they live in a computer program and that evil beings of light have forced them back into this miserable existence so that they can have the energy sucked out of them. If you want to make that decision, if that gives you comfort, I'm not going to get in the way of that. I want nothing to do with you or your life. I think it's a miserable, pathetic existence. And it doesn't sound like a hell of a lot of fun to me. But when I have said to myself, you know what, whatever's going on in my life, I must have chose it on some level, whether I realize it or not. So I'm going to stop complaining about it. And I'm going to start asking myself, what can I do differently? How can I change this? And that opens me up to things that I could never have thought of if I was in that place of victimhood. And I'm able to accomplish things that I didn't think were possible. And that taught me. So I have physical life experience that has proven to me that when I adopt the assumption that I've chosen to incarnate in this life, I've chosen for all of my challenges, and all of my challenges are ways that I can learn and grow. And so I'm going to look at them that way. And then I'm going to make the decision to be as happy as I fucking possibly can. And I'm not going to let anything get in the way of that. And if I start with that assumption, it works. Physically, I healed myself of disease. Emotionally, it's helped me. Financially, I'm almost 55 years old and I've got 16.5-inch arms, and I don't take anything at all. I'm completely natural. It's not impossible, but a lot of other 55-year-olds out there that don't have that experience. This is the result of that, of saying to yourself, I take full responsibility for my life. That's the assumption. I chose to have it all, and I can have everything that I want. And I'm not going to let anything stop me from going out and getting it. Listen to my words. I speak very specifically. I didn't say I'm going to let it come to me. I'm going to go out and get it. Ooh, I'm on a roll. All right, so I answered that. That came from some question about witches. Anyway. Mad Sweeney's beer question. If we are always reincarnating toward being elves, who are ancestors if we are all here learning lessons? Your question isn't, you don't have a coherent question there. So again, if you're going to ask a question, please make sure if you don't, this is when I see a big paragraph, I know that somebody is operating from their emotional reaction to something that I've said. They're not really thinking through. And the if questions, whenever a question starts with if, what you're trying to do is you're trying to number one, make me accept your premise, your assumption, which I may not accept. And then you're trying to drive me to your conclusion. And so you're making a straw man argument. So whenever the question is if, so you start the question, if we are always reincarnated towards being elves, who are ancestors? So I'm giving you a hard time, and undeservedly so, because that is an assumption that I have said. But even so, who are ancestors if we are all here learning lessons? I don't know what you mean by that question. Ancestors are people who have passed away. So I don't know if you were here from the beginning or what I've said, but this is going back in time. Maybe I've answered it and you no longer have that question. But again, that's just not phrase your question better, because that's just not a very well phrased question. It's not clear. So I'm not going to answer it because I don't know how to answer it. Cosmo Joe question. In the past, when achieving particularly high states I have had experiences of communication with what I then called guides. But I couldn't sustain the state. How does one stabilize higher states? Well, the assumption is that you need to stabilize it. Why do you need to stabilize it? I don't try to achieve any state. I don't try to stay in long contact with the ancestors. I figure if somebody needs to tell me something, they can tell me, and they'll figure out a way. And if I go into meditation, I'll get whatever information I need. So, I've had, the messages that I've got sometimes are just one word messages, or one thing will flow through my head, and then I stick with that and I meditate on it. And that one vision is actually a downloaded, compressed file that may take months or years or the rest of my life to understand. So you're trying to artificially create a state, and you have length of time. You assume that the length of time that you achieve that state is more valuable than less time, and it may not be. So I don't have the answer to your question, number one, because it's not something I care about. I don't need to stabilize any kind of state of being. If they want to tell me, they'll tell me. And if it's a one-word, thing, or if it's one vision or a feeling, that's fine. I'll use that. Okay. That again is kind of like, again, I know Cosmo Joe and I have a history. It does sound like an intellectual kind of question, not necessarily pure intellect, but it's the same kind of thing. It's why people do drugs. People do drugs because they want an extended altered state, and they think by the length of time that they're in some altered state that they're having fun, or they're, if they think it's a spiritual experience. But that's just not how the universe works. Time and length of time is kind of meaningless. But it means something to the intellect, because then you can say, yes, for a half an hour I was doing this and I felt that. And it's kind of an intellectualized idea of things. And again, the intellect wants to when the intellect is out of balance, it wants to divert you from your human experience. So seeking to have a sustained state feels like that you're trying to disconnect from your human experience. Cosmo Joe, the most spiritual thing you can do is to be human and to experience that in your full consciousness, and to have all of your human emotional feelings. It's the most powerful thing you can do. There's nothing more spiritual than sitting on the toilet. That is as spiritual as being in a heightened state of consciousness and talking with beings of the other realms. There's no difference. It's all one spiritual experience. Your emotional experience is as spiritual as it gets. All right. Isis Blackfeather question. Whoops, what happened? Where'd you go? How do you honor and or call upon your ancestors if you don't know who they are? Okay, so there's an assumption. Your assumption is that you need to know who they are to be able to call on them. Get out of yourself. You don't need to know. They know you. How do you honor and call upon your ancestors if you don't know who they are? And the ones you do know about brought great evil upon the world when they lived. So don't worry about them. All you need to worry about is the ancestors that want to work with you. You know, maybe they're thousands of years old, maybe they're not. It doesn't matter. Again, don't think about it too much. Like what I was saying to Cosmo Joe, you're overthinking it. You're also projecting your own personal pain onto that issue. So don't make a big deal out of it. You know, if you want to just face northwest and worship the elves, you can't go wrong with them. They may tell you who they are, they may not. It's none of your business. You don't need to know. Okay. Nathan Johnson, question. Do you have to incite? Do you have to incite on how the gods and the ancestors work together? I don't know what you mean by incite. Do you have to incite on how the gods and ancestors work together to help us on our spiritual path? A lot of these same questions. So there's a lot of people out there. They're really, forgive me for, lumping you all together into one bag here, but there's a lot of insecurity out there. What I hear in these questions are people are insecure. I can feel the fear and the pain and the insecurity and the loneliness. I can feel it in your questions. And, first, when you go onto my YouTube channel, the free YouTube channel, on there is a set of videos which are called the free shamanic certification. And I start with giving you the basics of shamanism, step by step, what to do. And again, let me just make the pitch. If you're on this Q&A and you're really serious about this, you've got to go and spend time watching my videos. Learn how to search from within somebody's channel, not just YouTube. If you type something into YouTube, you'll get everybody's channel and it'll, it's constantly trying to distract you. Learn how to, on your device, whether it's your phone or your iPad or your desktop, how to search within somebody's YouTube channel, search within their videos. Go on and watch that one. I think there's a whole playlist of, the shamanic certification, free shamanic certification. The first thing that I tell you, in order to make any progress in this path, is that you have to start from the assumption that the universe loves you and that you trust the universe. I didn't say that you had to know what the universe is, because you don't. You just have to trust it. Every single religion that comes from fear, every single belief system out there. I talked briefly about the QAnon conspiracy nonsense. It's, oh my God. The nonsense that people will believe. It all starts with an assumption of fear. That you can't trust anything. You can't trust anything anybody says, no matter whether it's a fact or not. You can't trust anything. If you start from that assumption, then every single belief and assumption and conclusion you make will be built upon that, and it will all be, at best, mistaken. So the point is that the first thing you need to do, all of these people asking me about, well, how do I know about the ancestors? And what if I don't know who they are? And what if this? And what if that? You're operating from a state of fear, and your assumption is that the universe won't take care of you. Your assumption is that it's up to you to know how to talk to the ancestors. This, again, came from Christianity. Christianity said that you have to believe in Jesus, and if you die and you haven't given your life over to Jesus, then you're going to burn in torment forever, which is, if you don't know who God's right name is, you can't go to heaven. It doesn't matter how sincere you are. This is what they taught in church. All those poor Buddhists, they think that Buddha is going to save them, but you know what? If you don't call upon the name of Jesus, you're going to burn in hell forever. The assumption is that creates an assumption of fear. And this is, indigenous belief systems. Go and find one if you can still find one. Go find somebody that hasn't been tainted with that and start doing that. And they're going to go, what are you talking about? The jungle takes care of me. I don't have to worry about what I'm going to eat a week from now because, gosh, there's a monkey in that tree and there's a fruit on that plant and there's water right there and there's fish right there. It's right there. It's all around me. Food is all around me. Energy is all around me. My ancestors are around me. Some of them will carry around like a piece of the skull as a necklace. They carry their ancestors with them. You know, they're loved. They have an assumption that the universe loves them and wants to take care of them. If you have an assumption that the universe is out to get you, that it's arbitrary, and that you can't trust it, then you feel that you are completely responsible. Well, I have to know who they are, and if I don't do this, so how do I do it? If I don't know who they are, you don't have to know anything. I've given you one simple thing to do: face northwest and say, what do I need to know? And that guaranteed, whatever message you get is going to be coming from the ancestors. And it doesn't matter who they are, what they are. Don't make such a big deal out of it, is my point. Trust and everything will happen the way it's supposed to. Nathan Johnson question. Do you have an... Oh, I already answered that question. Black Earth Productions question. How have the energies overall been on your end lately since before and after the blood moon eclipse? Crazy. After this latest eclipse, there was a huge shift, and I am still... All kinds of stuff is coming at me and changing in ways and in a much more accelerated time period. And I've got to get used to it. You know, and I'm telling myself that, you know, I'm going to get used to this, that I'm going to intend things and things beyond my wildest dreams are going to happen faster and more intensely than I imagined. And it's like an overnight shift. And I won't get into it, but there's been a few things that's like, oh my God, I never thought this was going to happen. You know, and I'm like, wow, really, I must really be something. Wow. So there's been a lot of that. That's basically, in a short answer, that's what's been happening with me, and I'm sure I'm not alone. Gert Van Zyl question, how do you know the difference between a channeled message and your own ego? That's the idea. That's the question. How am I supposed to tell you that? If you're unconscious and you're trapped in your own ego, how are you going to know if I tell you? That's an answer you have to figure out. And the only way you can figure that out is by becoming conscious. The only way to become conscious is to look at what your agendas are. I've given you a few. Do you have fear? Do you have a basic agenda? Do you have an assumption that the universe is out to get you and that you're responsible for everything, and if you don't do it right, you're a screw up? Well, that's unconscious fear. You're going to have to work through that. Otherwise, you will project that. You know, when you think about the goddess Kali, I've said this before, but or the goddess Hela, the goddess of the underworld. The goddess Hela is half corpse and half beautiful woman. Kali is seen as she's called the goddess of death, which is absolutely 100% false. She is not the goddess of death. She is the most loving mother in the universe. So how is it that the most loving mother in the universe is really frightening, that she has this crazed look on her face, blood streaming out of her fanged mouth? She has severed heads or skulls around her. She's got a skirt made of severed human arms. How is that the most beautiful mother in the world? Because the severed arms represent your karma, because your actions. She takes them on. The severed skulls represent specific personal failings, ego, greed, fear, self-indulgence, whatever. They're your personal character defects that are causing you pain and misery. The blood that is streaming out of her mouth is the blood of those demons. Ego, fear, those same demons. She sees them as demons that are trying to destroy you. So what does she do? She devours them. And the blood is the blood of those demons streaming out of her mouth. Ah! She is crazed, and I'm getting emotional here. She is crazed with rage because she sees her children being tormented by these challenges and these difficulties. And what you see in her is the rage of a mother wanting to protect their child. You know, a large portion of grizzly bear attacks is when you get between the mother bear and her cubs, because she is going to tear you to pieces because she wants to protect her cubs. You know, same thing with other animals. You know, a lion will come after, whatever, some smaller animal, and if it's between them, the smaller whatever it is, it's some smaller animal, a cat or something like that, will drive away a giant lion because of the ferocity of the mother who wants to protect her children. So Kali wants to protect you from your own self-sabotage. And so because you're attached to it, you're attached to your ego, you're attached to your victim mentality, you're attached to your fear because that's all you know and you take comfort in it, and you're afraid of what will happen when you do evolve, and your fear of evolution. Your mother says, I don't care if you're afraid of this, you're my child and I want what's best for you, and you are going to evolve whether you like it or not. And she goes in there to devour that fear out of you. But because you're attached to it, you see all that horror. But what you're doing is you're viewing it through your fear or your greed or that, whatever it is that's not you. But you think it's you, and you identify with it. And that's the lens through which you see her coming at you, and so it frightens you. And it's going to be painful. Saturn is the planet associated with Kali. Saturn is karma, which means lessons. If you are somebody who you feel like the universe is just on top of you and you can't bear the weight of the challenge, the difficulty, it means that Saturn has said, listen, my child, you have got to give this up. This illusion that you are a weak being is destroying you. And I am going to make your life miserable until you learn that lesson. And then when you learn the lesson, Saturn goes, that's all I wanted. Now let me show you what you've gained from learning that lesson. Saturn will make you a king, will make you rich beyond your wildest dreams, will give you the greatest happiness if you are willing to learn the lesson. If you're not, then you are going to see, this is why, David Icke and all of that talk about the Saturn moon matrix. Because who are the people who buy into David Icke reptilian stuff? Is people who think they're victims, people who are miserable, drug addicts that want to be taken out of their miserable existence, and you don't understand what I've been through. They don't take responsibility. I'm not trying to belittle you. But if you take responsibility, if you start with the assumption that whatever's going on in my life, I created it either in this life or a past life, and so whining about it isn't going to change anything. Show me what I need to do to make my life better. Whatever it takes, I'll do whatever the hell it takes, however long it takes, I will do whatever it takes. Then you start slowly building, and it's hard work and it's painful, but you grow and you get big, strong spiritual muscles. And then when you're done with that, nothing can touch you. This is one thing Saturn will do for you. In the next life, if you have a difficult life this time and you feel like a victim, if you decide, I am going to take full responsibility, and even if I die doing it, I am going to live responsibly without denying my pain or my fear. I'm going to take action towards creating the life that I want. And if you die in the middle of that, what will happen is your next life, you find a Vedic astrologer, he will say something like, hey, you have retrograde Saturn in the 6th house. This means that you are going to defeat all of your enemies, and when you have overcome your karmic challenges, you will rule the universe. That's the kind of thing. You've got to have the long view. You've got to have the long view, which is, again, if you have people in your life who have harmed you, you owe it to them to be the best person that you can be, even if they reject you for it, and they will. If they reject you for you being a strong, powerful individual, then what will happen is when they die, they will take your example with them, and their soul will take it into their next life, and they may make choices in their next life because of what you did for them by living your life and refusing to let other people's failures pull you into a state of victim mentality. Boy, I'm really on a roll today. Let's see, any more questions? I have a lot more questions. So Black Earth Productions had asked a question, what can you share about the Wheel of Samsara? I'm highly interested in what you have to share, which is interesting because that's basically what I just talked about. So I proactively ninja answered your question ahead of time before reading. So there you go. By the way, this illustrates something. If you're my student and you want me to teach something, put it into your ritual. Put it out to the universe that there's something you want to learn. And I will get some strange idea about, hey, I think I'm going to do this, and I'll think it's my idea. And then I'll talk about it, and people go, I was just hoping you would do that. This is the teacher-student relationship. You don't have to ask me directly lots of times. You know, if this is how you know this is what I'm supposed to do. Because if you put it out there and I get the idea, it means that the ancestors, the gods, the spirits are going, yep, that's what we want them to do. Thanks for asking, and then they tell me. So you're part of that. You may even have had the idea or been brought to me because I was meant to teach that at some point. So that's an interesting thing because I think I answered that. That is basically how I would have answered that question. Sean, question, do you believe that, where'd we go? Do you believe that the spiritual practices of the Japanese ninja or shinobi clans share lineage and ancestral connections with Chinese Taoists? I've been told that, and this is verified that some of them are. And I was told for a while that some of the stuff I did was actually some of the stuff that spawned the 5-element ninjas. I'm not sure that that's true, but I do believe that, yes, and it is true. Some of them have their own Buddhist things, and some ninjas aren't, but there are some ninja clans that are directly descended from Taoists who came to Japan and taught them, just like, karate. Open hand is basically a Chinese, a hard-styled Chinese martial art, which was given to the people in Okinawa. So it's a Chinese art, open hand, karate. It's a Chinese art. Of course, with their own slant on it. It's like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is its own style of Jiu-Jitsu, which is, some people say is superior, but it came from the Japanese, but then they turned it into their own thing. Om MM says, excuse me, question mark. I thought time does not exist. Anyway, I'm just pointing that out. If you have an actual question, you have to write question, and I will answer. And I'm not going to respond if you don't ask me in a respectful manner. Maybe you're respectful, but that comes across to me as disrespectful. So if you want my help, you got to be respectful. And people who aren't, I haven't seen it, but if people are disrespectful, I will block them from the channel at some point. Black Earth Productions question, can you share a little bit about Saturn and Virgo in the 9th house? Well, Saturn and Virgo in the 9th house. So what is their ascendant? So Virgo is 6. So let's see, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Anyway, I don't do math very well. What's the ascendant? First, I'll start talking about Saturn in the 9th house, but tell me what their ascendant is, because I can't see it in my head. I know I should be able to, but I can't. In Vedic, of course. Not in Western, because I don't know anything about Western astrology. Saturn in Virgo in the 9th house. So Saturn in Virgo, first off, what is the 9th house? The 9th house is your religion. It's one of the houses of your spirituality, but specifically it is the temple. It is the home of the priest. So Saturn so it's the natural home of Jupiter, so it has a lot of Jupiterian. the ninth house, not Saturn or Virgo, but the ninth house has a Jupiterian vibe to it. So it's the temple, and Saturn is the judge. So the judge is off of his seat. He's not judging criminal cases or anything like that. The priest has said, "Hey man, I'm going on vacation. Can you come and be the priest for a while?" And Saturn says, "I'm not a priest." And Jupiter says, "I don't care. I just need somebody to do the ritual. I left a little thing there for you. Just follow the instructions." And Saturn says, "All right." So Saturn goes and walks over and sits in the ninth house, which is the temple. Now, when Saturn gets there, Saturn is going to be a pretty harsh priest. So that means Saturn is going to be thinking about karma and spiritual karma and past lives. And so if you come in, Saturn is going to be saying, "Yes, I'm the priest, but let's talk about your past lives. And let's talk about what it is you need to do to get yourself right and aligned with your own soul." It's a lot different than Jupiter. Jupiter sitting there, or Venus, or the moon. They're going to be like, "Oh, come on in. There's a nice cushy pillow here. Here, have this drink, and let's do this nice song, and let's play some music. And that smells good, doesn't it? Oh, don't worry. Everything's fine. Oh, you are absolved, my son." Right? That's one of the squishy planets. Saturn is like, "No, man. You can't play around with your spirituality." Virgo. Virgo is Mercury, specifically the internal vibration of Mercury, which is Mercury. Virgo has a connection to healing, but in order to be a healer, the virgin goes into the temple library and starts looking up all of the herbs. So Virgo is very studious and says, "No, if I don't take that herb in that exact amount, that's not going to cause the healing." And so they're very critical because they have to be very precise, right? So this is Virgo. Virgo is very precise, very critical in that way. So Saturn in Virgo makes Saturn really critical. But it will create, as I'm talking about it, I can feel what the idea is, that Saturn in Virgo says, if you pay attention to detail, we are going to blow things open, and you are going to understand healing, whatever it is, spirituality, whatever it is, on a level nobody ever has. But we got to be really precise about this. So you can't screw around. And if you screw around, we got to start over again. So that's my take on Saturn and Virgo in the ninth house. Again, if you want, astrology.thunderwizard.com. Anyway, I got more things. Can you share about Saturn or Aries or Pisces in the ninth house? So no, I don't want to make this an astrology thing. Very quickly, Saturn and Aries, it depends on the house. And it depends on the sign, the ascendant sign, which is the first house. But Saturn in Aries is really powerful. Aries is the warrior that's going out. Saturn, when you have the power of the judge behind it, it's like the warrior has the decree from the judge that all those who do not blah, blah, blah shall be put to death. It's a very ruthless, powerful Saturn. If it's in the 10th house, it means that you are a ruthless businessman. You work your ass off and you achieve a lot of success, but you work your tail off and you crush all of your opponents. Anybody that's like a big stone, you just crush them. Of course, it'll all depend on what the nakshatra it's in, which is the specific star constellation. It gets really precise. I'm just talking generally my own take on it. So I don't know. Somebody might disagree with me. Pisces in the ninth house. The ninth house is the house of Jupiter. Pisces is the the internal experience of Jupiter. It's the 12th house, which is the house of death, meaning leaving the physical plane into the spiritual. So if you have Pisces in the ninth house, then we're talking about the temple of transformation to the heavens. And so there will be a lot of talk about life after death and the gods and the other realms and all of that. So whatever planet is in there will make a big difference. If Mars is in there, it'll be the warrior for the truth of the afterlife. If it's Jupiter, it'll be then a very powerful priest of who can talk to to the spirits and the gods, and bring that 12th house energy into your religion. That's just off the top of my head here. Russo Van Royen question, and then nothing. So maybe he comes up later. Okay, so Mike Sell, if you want to ask a question, put question so I can see it. You're obviously new to the channel. You're asking a lot of questions, basic questions. So to make the best use of your time, if you're serious about learning what I have to teach, go on to my channel and watch the videos. 99% of your questions are going to be answered in there. To come on like that and just to throw them out there, what is an ancestor? What? It's coming off very childish and very disrespectful. I want to give you the benefit of the doubt. If you're really interested in learning, you can go and watch as many channels on my YouTube channel as you want. And if you have an actual question, come on and be respectful with it and have it be an intelligent question. I will be happy to answer it for you. Okay? Okay, all right. Gert Van Zyl. That's not a question. Anyway. All right, that's it. All right, I'm going to take a short break. We've been on for 2 hours, so I might have something more to say. It kind of depends on you guys if you have questions. I'm going to take a break and come back. I feel like there's something else that needs to be said. So anyway, I need to eat something. All right, I'll be right back. Alrighty. While I'm remembering, this is something I wanted to do. All right, so one of my apprentices, his name is Mark Graham. He's been studying with me for a while, studying my books and my videos and everything else. He has come up with a really wonderful set of rune cards. He calls it Runes for Writers, because he himself is a writer. And I'm trying to make sure you can see that without. There you go, maybe. Runes for Writers, and the runes are actually pretty cool. Now he's got his own little booklet and other things like that, which will help, I guess, writers work on empowering their creative ability to. Anyway, I don't want to speak for him. He uses some of the knowledge that he has gleaned from my information, and I have to tell you, it's really quite an honor. What a tremendous compliment to see people taking the information that I have given, to practice it and to incorporate it, and then create something new of their own, which is the whole idea behind what I'm doing. I'm not here. This isn't about me. I don't need to, I don't need any of that kind of garbage. My job, I can tell you, my job here is to transmit the information that's given to me and leave it, some of it in still like raw chunks of knowledge, like the understanding of the rune wheel and the understanding of the thunder wheel and the 8 directions. All of that is still very raw knowledge that can be expanded upon. And my job is to get all that information out and get it available to people. And then when I'm done, when I'm no longer on this planet, then that knowledge will continue. Again, this is what we're talking about. This is the worship of the ancestors. And so, assuming that that's true, and in another 50 years when I'm not on this planet anymore, people will be talking about Michael William Denny and his work. And here's what I've learned, and I've expanded upon that. And so my energy that I put here, people will be acknowledging their ancestor. Not just me, my own personal experience of myself, but the energy and the work that I've projected is also your ancestors. So let's see here. He's got this really cool design on here, which has the Aish Yalmer, and it's got all the runes on it. And it's here to look like a rune stave carved from wood. Very cool. Let me see. Is there a website? If so, I'll write it on here. I'm sure there is, but trying to find, give me a second here. I'm not seeing a website on here. Mark Graham. Anyway, I'll write his name down. I'm pretty sure it's markgraham.com, but I'm not sure. Mark Graham. Runes for Writers. I don't know if this is out yet. I maybe have gotten one of the one of the first ones, but anyway, it's coming soon if you want it. So there you go. All right, so understand that I'm in this thing with you guys. I'm not the guy sitting on the mountaintop and I have no connection. I am part of this process. There's information that's coming through me. All the books I've written not because, especially in the beginning, I didn't even know. I had no plans on where this was going to go. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just had information that I had to get out. For my own sanity, I had to get it out. And I just put it in books and I self-published it, and I figured that would be the end of it. I could get on with my life. And so as I continue to teach these things, your experience and what you do with it, especially when you share it back to me about how you've taken these principles and you've used them and here's how they've worked, that helps me, because then I go, oh, I'm not imagining this. This really is a science and it really does work. And then you don't need me anymore. Once you have the knowledge and you have the skills and you know how to put it into practice, you don't need me anymore. The true understanding of a teacher is, like in the word Sifu, in the Chinese, Sifu means father teacher. And the true idea of a Sifu is that a Sifu wants their students to be better than they are. And that's what I want. There are some of you have taken some of these things that I've given, because there's no way I can master all of this stuff. Even though I've got the understanding of it and I've been given the blueprint, doesn't mean I have, there's only 24 hours in a day, and I got to surf and sleep and, eat and have fun. There are some people working with me who have taken some, a specific niche that they're in and taken my knowledge, and they're expanding it beyond ways that I could even wow, that's, that's, to me, that's how you know true knowledge. True knowledge is not something that I've made up in my head. True knowledge is something that's been passed through me from the ancestors. They have the blueprint. The ancestors are up there, and what I can tell you is that the ancestors of all of the different religions and races and creeds and cultures, they are up there together, working together. Our friend Sethicus Boza of Black Earth Productions, who was on here. I don't know if he's still on here. But, he talks about the Wisdom Council. He sees it. He sees that all of the knowledge is coming together, and that, he has the humility to call me. I do different stuff than him. He calls in, if you've watched his channel, he just brings in masters from other traditions and lets them talk. Because he understands that what the Wisdom Council is now is that all of the cultures are coming together with their knowledge and creating a synthesis. And in the synthesis, you get rid of the stuff that doesn't fit. You get rid of all of the, this was the idea behind mixed martial arts, is that it was going to take the best of all of the martial arts and get rid of the stuff that works and, find the stuff that does work. And, and MMA has come up with some really effective, powerful martial arts as a result of that. I practice syncretic shamanism as well as Norse shamanism and, Vedic and Taoist and all of that. But the syncretic part of it is that I get rid of the stuff that doesn't apply universally. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. It's just I want to create something that is applicable to everybody, especially the modern audience. And I can tell you that this is coming from the ancestors. They're the ones doing it. They're creating the blueprint. They're downloading the stuff into me. I can barely handle it. It drives me crazy. So I make a book or a DVD, or I come on here and I spout for 3 hours and then I can sleep. That's what's happening. The Hopi myth, as I understand it, I'm not Native American, nor have I been taught by any Hopi or certified by them. But as I understand the public information out there, according to them, in the beginning, the first tribe of humans was just one tribe, and the universe told them to split up into 4 different clans, and they went off into different directions, and they learned the different elements, and they became the 4 races. The white race, which would be the Europeans, my ancestors learned to master fire. Everything that our technology creates right now, I've got these electric lights that can create fire. I've got a car that starts with a spark plug. We've got all nuclear weapons, all of that. These are all fiery things. We could talk about whether or not we've used that knowledge with enough responsibility, but that's another talk for another time. And all of the knowledge of the other 3 cultures and races, the Chinese were to learn air, which is qi, prana. They are the masters of prana, of qi, of energy work. The kundalini, which is the fire of kundalini, which is Indo-Europeans, which would be connected to my ancestors. They found kundalini, which is fire. You have the Africans were meant to master water, and that is rhythm. Rhythm, like water, permeates everything. All of our music today that we listen to Even the racists who drive down the street listening to their heavy metal, they are listening to African-inspired music because it has bubbled and seeped into even them, even those that think that they're white supremacists. And then who else is left? And then the Native Americans mastered Earth, and they bring their knowledge and their wisdom of Earth. And now is the time for all of us to come together and to create this. And that's what this path is. I remember when I was first putting this together, and I had been training in Taoism for who knows how long, and I had been having this download and connecting to my ancestral teachers. I had connected to Mother Hulda and understood that she was the original earth goddess for those Africans who first got to Northern Europe, and they were worshiping her, and they called her Hul. She's at least 50,000 years old, if not much older. Maybe she was there long before and they discovered her. When I found out that that was the goddess who had taught me the Hul breath, if you haven't, please do it. This is the main thing that I teach. If you want the benefit of her, and if you want to be initiated into this path of the Thunder Wizard, you start with the Hul breath, which will initiate you into her power. And she will be your mother and your teacher, regardless of what your ethnic or cultural background is. She accepts everybody because she's everybody's mother. I'm getting very emotional. What was I saying? Anyway, you get where I'm going with this. This is what's happening. This is the Wisdom Council. This is who we are. We're heading into a very, very exciting period. There's a lot of really crazy stuff going on, but and there's some things that do worry me. I won't lie to you. Climate change is very worrisome for me because that's not something we can take back. This is one of the things, when you hear people talking about, well, if we reduce carbon emissions, then, there's an assumption that we can reverse global warming. That's not going to happen. Because once you've released that carbon fuel into the atmosphere, it stays there. It's cumulative. The things that we're experiencing now with the floods and the fires and the melting of the ice caps and the hurricanes, and that's increasing. That's not a lie. That is a reality. Those things are increasing. I can tell you, I've been here 55 years. I have my air conditioner on. I live next to the ocean. As a kid, you never needed that. Back in the 60s and 70s, you never needed it. Never. That's why houses in California, if you get them, you find some, especially along the coast, built 1950, 1960, 1970, they don't have any air conditioning because you didn't need it. Just open a window. You needed heaters, but you didn't need that. That stuff isn't going anywhere. So we can't reverse it. The best that we can do is if we went to zero carbon emissions, which we can do. We have the technology. There are just now you want to talk about true conspiracies. There is a conspiracy out there, and it's by people who have money and want money, and they do that through with oil products. There's a lot of money in that, and they don't want that to stop. So they have a conspiracy to tell you that global warming is some kind of political lie. They can't explain to you how there's money attached to it, but they want to tell you that. And people who unconsciously are afraid, number one, they feel guilty, which is self-directed anger, and they have an unconscious hatred for the planet, which was given to us way back when in the Middle Ages by the Christian missionaries. That all ties into people buying into that, and that's why you have religious nutcases who tell you that it's against God's word to believe in global warming. I was told that once by a Christian. Anyway, the point is that there are some things we can't reverse, but this is the last gasp of Kali Yuga. Just like when you move through a season, and even though it's October, and then the cold winds will come, and then all of a sudden a heat wave will come. It's because the seasons are, and you're still getting sometimes a little bit of a wave from the past season comes in, even though technically you're in the fall, you're still feeling like summer. That's what we're at now. We're not in Kali Yuga anymore. We're in Dvapara Yuga. We're moving out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And we're getting the blowover from the previous time period is coming as the last gasp of the elites. The time of Aquarius is the elites will be leveled, be a level playing field. And the last gasp is they go out of their way and they make the biggest stink just before they die. Don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime or not, but it will happen. I can feel that. We're moving into an incredibly exciting time period where all of this knowledge is going to come together. And this is coming from the ancestors. The ancestors up there are coming together. And we are a reflection of what's happening, as above, so below, as they say. All right, so that's my last little bit of preaching there. Let's see what else is coming up, if there's anything else that, any other questions. There seems to be. I'll try to get through some of this pretty quickly. Russo Van Rooyen question, pardon my ignorance, but you have truly sparked my curiosity. What if I have both Saturn and Jupiter and Pisces in the 9th house in Vedic astrology? I will tell you the answer to that if you go here and you get a reading, astrology.thunderwizard.com. I don't want to turn this into an astrology course today. So you can go to astrologycertification.thunderwizard.com if you want to get certified in my type of astrology, and then you can learn that on your own. Yeah, that's Western astrology, so I don't know the first thing about Western astrology is different from Vedic by 24 degrees, so we could be talking, you might not have Jupiter and Pisces in the 9th house, it could be totally different. Rami question, teacher, I saw you often talking about the 4 pure, I didn't say pure races, I never said anything about pure. Teacher, I saw you often talk about the 4 pure races and their missions on the planets, but how about mixed races like Southern Americans? What makes you think that they're mixed? I'm really feeling offended by your question. I know you don't mean to be offensive, but there's a lot of racism in that question, which I find very offensive. And I never said anything about the 4 pure races. I have no idea what they looked like. I can tell you why I have white skin. It's because my probably pitch black African ancestors who spoke the Proto-Indo-European 50,000 years ago made their way into Ice Age Europe and got locked in there. And for 50,000 years, they squeezed out kids. And in order to survive, their kids had genetic adaptations which gave them lighter skin. I mean, I can't spend, in the summertime, I can't spend more than 15 minutes in the sun or I get sunburned. Even with, I've got a tan, even with my tan, I get sunburned. I have to slather myself in that. That is not, that is, if I didn't live in technology, my kids wouldn't survive. Only dark-skinned kids would survive in this without, So my ancestors lived through that. That's the only reason that they have that. Why you would ask that question, why that even comes into your brain, who cares? You're not listening to what I'm teaching you. Forgive me for being harsh with you, but you need to listen and wake up. I'm talking about syncretizing, that the time now is that the ancestors are syncretizing the knowledge. So who gives a flying fuck what color they are? Or if they're mixed race? Everybody's a mixed race. Every single person on the planet is a mixed race. There was never a point in time where things got pure. This idea that there's a pure race is nonsense. At some point in time, all the races, regardless of what they looked like, were in a process of shifting from one adaptation to another. That will continue. Whether it's because of globalism and intermarriage, I don't give a flying fuck. You take white people with the whitest skin on the planet, if you can call them pure. You stick them on a tropical island for 50,000 years and come back, even if they don't intermarry with other races, you're going to see a bunch of dark-skinned people walking around because all the white-skinned people died from skin cancer. So let's knock this bullshit off. Please. Please. Think before you ask a question. I know you don't mean anything by it, but honestly, think before you ask a question. Yeah. I'm this close to blocking you. We're really not interested. I'm not interested in you taking the time away from my looking at my questions. And I can promise you that other people are not interested in your opinion. The best way to contribute to this is to contribute to the discussion, which is to ask a question. Okay? This is not a free-for-all. And that's so that we can stay on topic, and then I don't have to take my time scrolling through a bunch of paragraphs of people spouting their opinion. If you have an opinion that has a value, I am happy for you. Go start your own channel and spout your opinion, and then you can do what I do. Nathan Johnson question. I misrepresented my question. How do the gods and the ancestors work together to help us on our spiritual path? Well, why do you need to know how that happens? And I think you've asked this question before. If not you, somebody else. There's an assumption that there's some kind of difference between the gods and the ancestors. You don't need to know how they work together. They do work together. That's all that matters. When you worship the gods, you are also empowering and worshiping and healing the ancestors. When you work with the ancestors, you are also empowering your connection to your gods. It doesn't matter why you need to make that schism in your head. I would need to talk to you. There's something going on with you about that. You're thinking about it too hard, which means there's something in you. I don't know what it is. In any case, I appreciate the fact you have the question. I'm saying it doesn't matter. You work with one, you work with all. That's how it works. Russo Van Royen. Okay, so that's not a question. Let's see here. Isis Blackfeather. So let's see, where are we going? Morris Lone question. So having no fear is how you master the matrix. Is Earth a prison? New to the channel, obviously you are. You need to go and watch I've got tons of videos on the matrix and what it is and how to escape it. And yes, that's what I teach, is that you start from a place of no fear, which isn't stupidity. It just means that you don't buy into any fear-based belief system. Any belief system that says that you're a victim, or that you're a victim of something greater than you, any belief system that doesn't tell you that you yourself are the omnipotent creator of the entire universe, get rid of it. And the earth is only a prison if you've chosen to make it one. Go watch the previous one, the previous video, 2 videos ago, 3 videos ago, where I talk about how the earth is a nexus point. It's not a prison, it's a nexus point. It's the most powerful place in the universe. All of the entities in the universe wish they could be human to experience the power of this nexus, and what a waste. What a waste of your time to feel like it's a prison. Because when you're done with it, you're going to go, oh my God, I was walking around beating myself up, being such a pussy, when I had this incredible opportunity to be in the nexus point of the universe. So the sooner you can realize that, the better off you and everybody else will be. Isis Blackfeather question. Will the things that I use and do to protect me from harm work against an ancestor that has harmed you in the past? Okay, so Isis Blackfeather. Give me a second because I'm getting something here for you. First off, I can tell you've got a lot of personal trauma in your life that you need help with. I don't know if you need to go to a counselor, you need to work with somebody like me, but you have a lot of unresolved and probably well-deserved pain and things connected to your past, your family. So first off, I can tell you that even if there is an immediate ancestor who has passed, who may have done very harmful things to you in your experience, that was them as a human. Remember what I said in the beginning is that the soul peels itself off. Okay, so the soul of whoever was in that body. And remember, you chose them. You came into this life and you said, I want that person and that person and that person. And you made a deal with whoever your abuser was. And you said, listen, I got to learn some lessons and blah, blah, blah. And they said, you know what? I'll volunteer to abuse you in this next life. And they don't take that stuff lightly. That's not to take away from them. It doesn't mean that they're free of their own karmic responsibilities. It means that you chose that. So you have got to own that. Your fear that they're going to come back and haunt you or harm you is your own projection based on your own fear-based, and I'm not judging you for it, your own victim mentality that you have now. But the soul of that person, I can promise you, wishes you no harm, wishes you nothing but happiness. They were in their human state and they were making whatever mistakes they went, violating their own soul contract, and they're going to have to pay for that in another lifetime. And they will be happy to do it. But I can promise you that that soul wants nothing but your greatest happiness in this life, especially if they're past. So please drop that. It won't serve you. Again, what is the basic assumption you have to start from? The universe loves you, and you have to trust the universe. So when you're worried about if I do something, is this going to cause a curse on me that's coming from a place of fear. Drop it. It doesn't serve you. Let me read the rest of your question. Well, the things that I use and do to protect me from harm, why are you putting so much effort in protecting yourself from harm? This again, you're starting from an assumption that you're weak and that you are a target. The more that you hold on to that, the more you're going to create it. You know, what is, again, Tai Chi, the martial art, and the Tao Te Ching. If you have nothing to defend, nobody can harm you. If you're protecting yourself, you have something to defend. This is like, just talk about Aikido, for example. Aikido martial arts is they take people's force and use it against them. As somebody comes at you with a big movement, it's actually for people don't know this. The reason why it doesn't work in hand-to-hand combat so well is because it was designed for battlefield warfare with people coming at you with swords and making big giant, wah! And somebody comes at you with all of this, then you can grab their arm and flip them and redirect them. Somebody's coming at you with this kind of stuff, it's hard to redirect. So if you don't have something big, there isn't anything that somebody can use against you. Right? They can't use your energy against you. Relax. Become nothing. Flow. And then there's nothing for anybody to grab onto. Spiritual or physical. This is why it's so important not to have personal agendas. And that's a whole other subject. But the more you have personal agendas, people can take those personal agendas, manipulate you, and use it against you. If you don't have a personal agenda, which means that you trust, and the way to not have a personal agenda is to trust that the universe is giving you everything you need. So I don't need anything from you. I don't need to steal from you. I don't need to manipulate you. I don't need to ask you to do anything for me because I get everything I need. I'm fine. The universe will always provide. There's always a monkey in the tree and a fruit on the thing and fish in the stream. There's always something. But if you think, oh my God, what am I going to do? Then you have to start, getting as many fish as possible. And now you have too many fish and they're going to start rotting and they smell bad. So now we have to build a refrigerator. Well, we don't have the means to create a refrigerator. So we're going to go steal some things from that white guy over there and create our refrigerator. And then we got to and now all of a sudden the jungle doesn't provide for you anymore. This is what happened to us. This is why our world is in the state that it's in. You say, I know this comes from fear, but it is fear for a very good reason. What are you trying to tell me I'm wrong? If you believe that fear isn't helpful for you, then that is not a good reason. There's only 3 natural fears. Everything else is learned. The first one is, and this is infants. Infants are afraid of loud noises, fast-moving objects, and heights. Because if they can't stand, so they can fall off of heights and hurt themselves, that's built into them. They're afraid of loud noises because that could mean some danger is coming. They're afraid of fast-moving objects. A rock could be flying at them. An animal could be lunging at them. These are natural fears that you're born with. Every other fear after that is learned, which means you can be in this moment and not be afraid. If you're in this moment and you're afraid, it's because you're thinking about something that happened to you in the past, like you are. Somebody harmed you in the past, but they're not harming you now. But you're acting as though they still are. So much so that you're afraid that in the spiritual realm they're going to come and harm you. Or you're thinking about the future, which means that you think the universe isn't going to give you what you need. So you're afraid, so I got to go kill some fish, and then I got to go steal a refrigerator, and then I got to steal some electricity from that guy, and oh my God, then I better get a gun because then he's going to come back for his refrigerator, so I'm going to have to shoot him so that he doesn't take my refrigerator, and then the fear never ends. So please don't bullshit me. When you know I'm going to tell you that fear doesn't help you, you can't then say, I know it's coming from fear, but trust me, I know better than you on this one. I'm supposed to be afraid. I feel for you. I'm very sorry whatever happened to you. I'm very sorry for that. But you have to go, what is it that I'm here to learn? Why did I choose to go through that so that I could learn? At the very least, I can promise you, you are meant to learn to let go of your fears. You came onto my channel. We have an eternal contract. At some point, you and I bumped into each other in the spirit realm, and I said, I'll help you with that. And you came onto my channel, and here I am helping you with it. It's tough medicine. You maybe not want to swallow it, but you got to get over it. I'm not going to co-sign anybody's self-sabotaging stuff, no matter how much you try to convince me that I need to understand. In this one instance, the rules don't apply. I'm not going to do it. I care about you too much. Bottom line is, now, here's the hard part, the part you may not understand. If you start to trust, the fear is going to increase. And then what is going to happen is you will mourn. You will mourn over what was done to you. Fear is a survival feeling. But what is even more painful than the fear is the sadness and the pain that you have that somebody who should have loved you harmed you. And that is very sad. It's making me sad, just thinking about it. And what it means is that when you drop the fear, then you're going to have a lot of crying to do. And then you're going to have to go through the growth period of having to forgive them. They did the unthinkable to you. And you have to forgive them. Sorry, but you do. When I used to do exorcisms, the only way I could get the demon to leave is if I got the person to acknowledge who harmed them and then make the commitment that they were going to forgive them. And until then, no matter how many times I said, in Jesus' name, blah, 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 the demon wouldn't leave. The demon would only leave when they forgave whoever harmed them. I can feel inside of me this is a big deal. It's a really big deal. Somebody needs to hear this right now and needs to acknowledge this. This is what you don't understand, everybody. When you let go of the fear, what you're really afraid of is the pain, the mourning that you will have to go through when you let go of the fear. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about. I'm going through it too. There's a lot of stuff going on in my life, and I won't get into it, but in order to accept all the things coming to me, I'm going to have to let go of my dead wife. I can't, she's not with me anymore in that way. Her energy with me, she's not my physical wife anymore. I've got to let go of that. That's painful, that hurts. Really hurts. I could imagine myself living the rest of my life. And I know some people do. They never marry again. They stay committed to that one person in their minds and in their hearts. And I honor them for that. Unfortunately, I have too high of a libido. I can't live like that. And so that's the pain I have to go through to get this success that is coming to me. This is coming from her. She's telling me this. If I want the success that's coming to me, if I want to be able to receive what she wants to orchestrate for me, which means, you know, a new lover in my life. I got to let go. I don't want to do it. It hurts. You want to let go of this ancestral pain, you've got to learn how to forgive who harmed you. And you're going to have to mourn what they did to you. And that little girl who didn't deserve that, whatever was done to you, you didn't deserve it. And it's so sad. What you wanted most was to be loved, and you got, not only did you not get loved, you got hurt. And that's horrible. And you need to cry over that and mourn over that and talk to somebody like me or a counselor or a group. But if you hold on to it and you hold on to that fear, it'll destroy you. This is why there's so many drug addicts out there. Okay, enough of that. Sean, question, what do you foresee in terms of transformation of human civilization during Dvapara Yuga? Not Vapata, but Dvapara Yuga, which refers to half and half. That's why our political system more than ever is split. It is so split that not only are there two completely, totally opposite viewpoints and opposite attitudes, but each side has its own news channels. I mean, if you go over to one side, they're getting information and they have this, and if you try and tell that to the other people, they'll go, I didn't hear that. The other people over here, they've got their own news channel, and they've got the QAnon who are telling them things that not even the news channels are telling them. Donald Trump and Barack Obama are secretly working together to take down Hillary Clinton or some crazy shit like that. It's just amazing. I'm laughing, but that is the epitome. That's where fear will take you. To nonsense land. What do I foresee in terms of transformation? What I see is it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. Those of us who do not buy into it, who do not buy into it, are going to continue to succeed. I'm succeeding because I'm not buying into anything. If I listened to what everybody told me, I would not be where I was today, where I am today. I'm where I am today because I don't listen to anybody but what the universe tells me. And I don't buy into any fear. And whatever my heart and my spirit tell me I do is going to make me happy, I go do it no matter how impossible it looks. And so you get to live in kind of this little safe, protected bubble where all that stuff just sort of flies over you. It's fun to watch. It's a little scary to watch, but I don't have to be a part of it. Torn Legorf, question, I have a deep desire. Okay, so let's see here. Let's back up. Again, the shorter your questions, the better it is for me. I have a deep desire to live in a post-collapse, post-apocalyptic age and often wonder where that comes from. Would you share any thoughts you have on that desire? Well, it sounds like you have a lot of rage. So you want to destroy the whole world. And you want to live by yourself. For you, safety means to destroy everything and everybody so you can live in a safe post-apocalyptic world. I felt like that when I was a Christian, many, many years ago when I was going to Bible school. Of course, I'd come out of my own horrific childhood past. I used to fantasize about, the end of the world and the apocalypse and God coming down and raining fire on all the, the evil ones and destroying the world. And then that was my own rage, my own fear. So I can only imagine that you have some probably unconscious rage. Rami's apologizing. I know you didn't mean anything by it. That's why I kept saying that. Morris Lone, you're new to the channel? Please ask more in-depth, intelligent questions. Man plus third eye equals God. Is that accurate? It's a really general What am I going to say? No. But what does that mean to be a God? It's more than that. So let's go deeper than that. Spend more time. I would like for you, if you're interested in learning from me, to spend more time watching my channel, read my books out there, michaelwilliamdenny.com. There's a ton of information out there. Learn, get at least a basic understanding of what I'm teaching, then you can ask intelligent questions about what I teach, not some superficial new age, whatever that you got off of somebody else's channel or something like that. I'm not trying to make fun of you, but it's a very, you can go much deeper than that. Me answering that question yes or no doesn't really give you anything. You haven't learned anything from that. It's cute information and it sounds spiritual and ultimately means nothing. Okay? I want to best help you. Best way to help you is if you put the time and effort in to watch my videos and read my books and learn what I teach. Then I really can help you. All right, let's see here. Yeah, see, I get all these people. There's just like these, these paragraphs of people who are either responding to something that I said or, listen, I don't want to see any of that, guys. If you got a question, you can ask it, but you don't need to justify anything to me. What I say is whatever I say. All right, so yeah, none of it. Jordan Levine, again, if you can't ask a question, I'll block you from the channel. Okay? I'm going to call you on bullshit, Isis Blackfeather. I'm not going to co-sign your bullshit here. And you said some other things which I didn't read, but I got the last one here. I'd say that crying at the same time is a bonding moment, which is good. So what you're saying, we're bonding together, okay. By the way, I've done therapy, all kinds of it for many years. It did nothing. So what? So you're going to give up? First off, I don't believe that. I would love to talk to your therapist and ask them how willing you were to take their direction. How much did you resist what they had to say? Makes me want to ask you, do you do drugs? Do you drink? Do you do any kind of chemicals to get you out of your feelings? If one therapist didn't work, so you're going to give up and you're just going to be a victim for the rest of your life and stay in your fear? Is that what you want? Go find somebody that can help you. Work with me. You don't think they'll work? Work with me. I'll counsel you. But you can talk to my students. I won't put up with bullshit for a second. If I think that you're making excuses or wanting to stay stuck in your fear, I'll say, I can't help you. There's the door. The only way to heal is to take the fearful action. So I don't buy that for a second. Maybe you've had the wrong ones, but I'm almost 100% convinced that you yourself didn't put as much action and effort into it as you could have. I also think there's probably other things going on. You're doing other things to divert yourself, whether it's drugs or alcohol or something else. Maybe I'm wrong. Okay? And Jordan Levine, I don't know what he said. I only see, had to say, love the truth you share. Okay. Anyway, I don't know what he's talking about. Anyway, I don't want to get into that personal back and forth with anybody. So there are no more questions. So we're going to end it here. So my friends, let's see. What else are we doing today? What else do I want to talk about? The new certification program, runecertification.thunderwizard.com. I've just started a new project, which I would like to put more time into, which is the Naga Conspiracy. So I just barely started it. If you want to look at it, you'll see what I'm going to do. I'm going to create its own channel, and then I'm going to do some ninja healing by co-opting other people's false beliefs, and I'm going to Aikido it on them and turn it around, and I'm going to create my own mythology. Instead of, what I do here is I confront people's fear and confront their misunderstanding. And another one, I'm going to actually co-opt it and use it against them without them knowing it. Before they know it, they're going to walk in thinking that I'm reflecting back their need to be frightened conspiracy junkies. And at the end, they're going to be empowered individuals. It's a whole new mythology coming through me. NagaConspiracy.com. There's almost nothing on there now, but there will be. All right, so Jordan Levine, it's not appropriate for you to be going on here and co-counseling somebody and asking and saying, I'll get in touch with me. So I am going to block you from, because you just kept on, you couldn't stop. You just kept on putting your thing out there. So this is what happens. Guys come in and people want to come in and do that and here talk to me, or he's wrong, or he's saying this. That is not an appropriate way to use this, so I'm going to hide you. Goodbye, Jordan. You can still watch it. You just won't be able to comment anymore. So let's say goodbye to him. I just saw there that has put a user in a timeout. Maybe I'll use that again too. Okay, very good. Okay, Isis Blackfeather takes no offense. That makes me happy because I mean nothing but love for everybody. And I do the best I can. All right, so, well, she's saying she went to therapists, even went to college to learn psychology. I will say there's limits to psychology. And this is what I do. I mean, not all psychology is like this, but there is, what is a misunderstood fundamental assumption about a lot of psychotherapy is that if we can just understand the unconscious, it'll fix itself, which is absolutely not true. Understanding the unconscious is the first step. The second and most important step is taking action despite our unconscious stuff. And if you have fear, so much so that you need to make an exception for, I know that fear is wrong except in this one case, then I know that there's stuff that you're not willing to take action on and let go of. Because you wouldn't say that to me otherwise. So that's the other thing. You're right. All of the psychology in the world isn't going to help you if you don't take the appropriate action, which is really the most important part. So that's probably what's missing in there. So again, this is what I'm here for. If people want to work with me privately, career.thunderwizard.com. But no, he didn't do anything. career.thunderwizard.com. Even though it's talking about career, that's where anybody can go if they want a private session with me, whether it's for any kind of counseling. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to go eat some food and obsess on who's trying to park in my parking space and try and take my own advice here. So that's it for me, my friends. You'll probably see me. It's only Friday, so I feel like it's a big weekend. Maybe you'll see me again before the weekend is up. Okay, that's all. Thanks.